wrestling fans. I'm hailing from Tampa, Florida, weighing 10, 12 pounds more than I did 10 years ago. I'm former TNA and WCW ring announcer David Penzer, doing my career interview for Great North Wrestling.
What are your earliest memories of wrestling when you were growing up?
I was 11 years old and had a cousin that was living with us for circumstances that have nothing to do with this story for a little while, and he was a wrestling fan, so he told me to turn on to Channel 6, which was a local station down in Fort Lauderdale that showed championship wrestling from Florida, and I was just hooked instantly. We had Dusty Rhodes and superstar Billy Graham, Ernie Ladd, Ox Baker, and I just got hooked from there, and I've been watching wrestling ever since.
What was the popularity of wrestling like in those days?
Well, it depends. You can't compare it to WrestleMania in a stadium or these fan fests that draw thousands of people. But to put it into perspective, they were drawing between 3,000 and 5,000 people every Wednesday night in Miami Beach, based on one hour TV show produced in a studio. So you can't really compare. It's like apples to oranges. But they were doing the Tampa, right here in Tampa. They were doing at the Armory on Tuesdays, probably 6,000 people on average. So 6 on Tuesday, 4 or 5 on Wednesday. Then they do the smaller shows. So you're talking about probably the same territory every week. Sunday was Orlando, Monday was West Palm Beach, Tuesday Tampa, Wednesday Miami Beach, and then Thursday and Friday, Saturday were spot shows. No, Thursday was Jacksonville, my bad. Then the rest were spot shows on the weekends. So you're doing the same cities, having to get creative, bring in new talent, get rid of talent, and drawing pretty good money at the time. But like I said, it's hard to compare to the mass level it's at now.
But locally, wrestling probably would have been more popular.
Yeah, more popular. If you added up the attendance of the Miami Dolphins games versus in a season versus the attendance at the Miami Beach Convention Center in a year, you'd have more people going to wrestling than you would to the Dolphins games. And that's when the Dolphins were good.
So who would have been some of your favorites in those days?
Well, Dusty Rhodes was awesome. He was the superhero here and went on to become a superhero in a lot of different territories, but he really started as a good guy, as a babyface here. Later on, I was always a big fan of The Assassin, huge fan of Terry Funk. When we got the Superstation, I became a huge fan of Roddy Piper out of Atlanta. Moving back down here, I was a big fan of Bugsy McGraw. And then as I got a little older, I started becoming more enamored with the business. I didn't know, I wasn't smart to the business in any way, shape, or form, but I got enamored more with the business than the individual wrestlers.
And you mentioned you saw superstar Billy Graham when you were younger. What did you think of him as a wrestler?
Back then you didn't really look at somebody as like are you a good wrestler, are you a bad wrestler, could you take good bumps? It was a lot different than what it is now. But his look, his charisma was amazing. Dusty had the charisma, but superstar Billy Graham had the charisma and the look, the muscles, and the long blonde hair. It was just, both of those guys stood out, but both had different kinds of charisma.
So when did you start thinking about wanting to become involved in the business?
My problem was I have no athletic ability and I'm 5'6", so let's be realistic. Back then it's a closed business. There was even no Wrestling Observer, so you don't know what's what. You watch it on TV, you go to the matches, you read the wrestling magazines, you kind of follow it, and I was always enamored with the entertainment aspect of the business, how you could get all these fans to be so into the different twists and turns and storylines. But, I always thought as an outside chance, maybe there's some way in. But for me, it was never really realistic. I'm sure for you as a bigger guy, athletic guy, I don't know your story 100%, but I'm sure you could see yourself, I could do this. Well, I couldn't do that. So how you got in when it was a closed business back there, I really never took it seriously, but it was always something in the back of my mind.
So what was your first foot in the door in wrestling?
There was a company called, 1988, called the Global Wrestling Alliance, based out of South Florida. It was when Hulk got big and WWF exploded, 84, 85, and this was like maybe 86, not 88. And they sold stock market on the penny stock exchange to raise money. And I think the whole thing at the end was a scam, but they eventually hired a guy named Dr. Red Roberts, who is a local indie wrestler, to run it. And then he hired a guy by the name of Bob Roop to be the booker, who you probably are more familiar with. And then they hired the great Malenko as sort of a consultant. And the offices and the school were right like 20 minutes from my house. Well, this guy, Dr. Red Roberts, he did a psychologist gimmick, but he was a real psychologist. My dad was a psychologist. He knew I loved the business. I was doing DJing then on the weekends, weddings, sweet 16s, parties. So my dad had an opportunity to meet Dr. Red Roberts, mentioned that I was DJ, that I could talk on a microphone, loved the business. He said, we're doing tapings at the Diplomat Hotel, have him come by. Nothing really happened at that point, but when they started up doing their next set of tapings, because there was like a 5-month gap between the Diplomat tapings and when they started doing regular tapings, between that gap, I had started kind of hanging out at the offices in the school after work, and Larry Malenko, kind of taught me the ins and outs of the business. I still wasn't quote unquote smart, but then they started doing spot shows, and then they let me ring announce the spot shows, and at that point I got smartened up. I don't know if you want me to tell the story. It's a funny story. First time I ever asked me to ring announce was in Immokalee, Florida, little town in the middle of nowhere, and Alex Baker was on the card, Corporal Kirshner, Iron Sheik, Adrian Street, so there was some decent indie talent. And so I go there. I've still never been in a locker room. They've always kayfabed me. And so I had no idea what to expect, but they said, go to the locker room. I went to the locker room. And the Iron Sheik was in there. He came around, said hello to everybody, shook their hand. Corporal Kirshner walks in, and him and the Iron Sheik look at each other and gave each other a big hug. How you doing, brother, man? Boom, a light bulb went off in my head. By this point, I knew it was choreographed, but you still don't know. Like, now that they're friends, you still don't know. Are they friends? Is this just a business thing where, they don't talk to each other, but they don't really hate each other? So then I got smartened up. But, people who watch this now probably think I'm nuts. But back in the day, there was no way to find out unless you actually were in the business. You had to be smartened up.
Did you have much dealings with Kirshner at all?
Not really. He headlined a few shows for us down there, but not really back then. I was just along for the ride, doing anything I could to get my foot in the door and to keep it there.
And what was your contact with Boris Malenko? You just mentioned that he was a consultant for that company.
He had an office down there. They had a school, so I'd go down afterwards. Guys like Norman Smiley trained there, Dave Heath, Gangrel trained there while I was hanging out down there. Tom Nash, who was one of the Blackhearts with Dave Heath, and a lot of other guys. And so I'd go after school / work to their offices / warehouse. And while Rusty Brooks and some of the other guys were teaching school, Larry Malenko would put his feet up on the desk and just tell me stories and ask me what I wanted to do and how I could do it, and just give me advice that, I could have never gotten. I couldn't have bought such advice. Back in the day, you had to have somebody like Larry Malenko see something in you as not an athlete, but somebody who might be able to be smart a little bit to the business in some capacity and smarten you up and help you out.
Why was he considered such a good heel? Because I understand he was one of the most attacked heels ever in the business. I wasn't
a fan when he was wrestling, so I don't really know. I know that he's legendary in this area. His sons, especially Dean, had a great career and now an agent. But he was an old timer who just took a guy like me under his wing, and then Bob Roop did too. After Larry Malenko kind of had a split with those guys, Bob Roop really took me under his wing, and that's really how I got my opportunity in this business.
And how did you end up becoming a booking agent for WCW?
Okay, so what happened is after Global ended, me and Bob Roop bought their ring and decided to promote independent shows. So we just did independent shows everywhere from Key West to, Tampa. We just went around and did indie shows. And I got to know Bob. He became like a family friend. And I ring announced, and we promoted and set up the ring, took it down, did all that stuff. And, driving around with Bob was like a history lesson to the inside of the business. Learned so much from Bob. And Bob got a call at one point from Ole Anderson when he became the booker at WCW. And Bob and Ole were close. Ole said, "Do you want to come up and be a road agent?" Bob said, "Sure." He's doing indie shows with some little Jewish guy. And so Bob said, "I'll try to take care of you." So he had me come up one time. He said, "Book 5 local guys, make sure they're good. WCW will rent you a car and a van, and you need to pick them up, drive them all the way to, I think we're in Marietta. And then WCW's not going to pay you, but you could get a $25 booking fee from each of those guys." So, and that was sort of the way it went back then. Rip Rogers would book guys and get a booking fee. Italian Stallion and George South would book guys and get a booking fee. Mike Jackson would book guys out of Alabama and get a booking fee. So that was sort of I was the Florida guy. I don't know if there was one before me. I don't think so. And so I lived in South Florida. If you know anything about the state of Florida, I trekked an hour and a half west, went up I-75, went across back I-4, which you know because you just came from, and then up to Atlanta, up 75, and did it to pick up. We picked up guys along the way, drove through the middle of the night, got there about 12 o'clock, went to catering, boom, the guys wrestled. We drove back, and I got my $125. But met Jody Hamilton, who was in charge of hiring the guys who hire the enhancement talent. And Jody was also probably the third guy in the trio of Larry Malenko, Bob Roop, and Jody to give me an opportunity to really learn about the business.
Because in those days, for anyone that doesn't know, there was job matches basically on TV shows.
Yeah, it was 90% of the matches were what they call enhancement talent. They were good wrestlers, and they could actually make more money doing local indies by losing to the guys like Ric Flair. And it's funny how the business was back then. You made more money losing to the stars in your local territory, and they got paid $125 a show from WCW to come up and put over the big stars, the Flairs, the Arn Andersons, the Rock and Roll Express, those guys at the time. So Jody booked those guys, and that's how it worked. And I did that for a couple of years, but what I did was I just tried to, because I had nothing to do during the matches, during the shows. So I tried to find little things that I could be, that I could help. Jim Ross would have me run guys to do the local promos, because back then they cut like hundreds of promos every TV taping, because they had to cut promos, localized promos that said, I did them towards the end of WCW when Gene wasn't there anymore. Hi, Fort Myers, we're coming to see you in 2 weeks, and they'd plug them in the syndicated shows. So they were doing hundreds of those, and so I ran talent. Jody let me make sure the guys were at the gorilla position. So you sort of integrate your way into, people know you're there. Junkyard Dog used to call me Walking Man, because all I'd do the whole day and night was walk around, getting people to sign the release forms, and that was just my way to ingratiate myself in. And I was just extremely lucky. Right place, right time, hard work.
What were the TV taping crowds like in those days for WCW?
When I first started out, they did like Marietta, which was a 2,000 seat building, and they did Gainesville, which was like a 1,500 seat building. They drew pretty decent. I mean, it's not a lot of people to fill up. And then later on they did Center Stage, which was sort of a studio type arena in Atlanta, it was a 700 seat building, but they gave out most of the tickets for free for those. They weren't playing big stadiums. Sometimes they'd do Columbia, South Carolina. So I'd say the average was 1,500, 2,000 people.
And what was your dealings like with Jim Ross in those days?
He just knew me as the guy that got the talent. I mean, that was it. I went up to Jim Ross one time and I said, "Jim, I know I'm a ring announcer. That's what I do. That's what I did down for Bob Roop. If you ever need a backup ring announcer, you ever need somebody, let me know. I'm happy for a tryout. I don't expect anything to be handed to me. I'm just happy to work hard." He said, "Noted," and that was about the extent, other than, "Hey, Penzer, go get the Rock and Roll Express." That was pretty much it.
So how did you transition into becoming an actual ring announcer for WCW?
Funny enough, Jim Ross, there was a time when Tony Schiavone was gone and Jim Ross was in WCW. Then there was like a couple of month period where Tony came back and Jim went to WWE. I don't think the two had anything to do with each other. It just happened. So Tony became the executive producer of those television shows. So Tony calls me to his office one day, and he said, "Are you the guy that drives the talent up from Florida?" And I said, "Yeah." He goes, "Well, we have a ring announcer opening." And I said, "Cool." And he said, "There's a guy that I used to work with in WWE named Dino Puglia. Could you drive him up next time for a tryout?" And my heart sank. I'm like, oh my God. So I'm like, Penzer, you got to say something now. This is your only chance. So I said, "Well, Tony, before you came, I had mentioned to Jim Ross when he was in your position that I'm a ring announcer also, and I'd love an opportunity if one arose." So he said, "All right, I'll tell you what. You drive Dino up next week, he'll get a shot, and then the week after we'll try you out. Whoever does better gets the job." And I say to this day, I think I won by default. I think we were both scared to death, me and Dino. I think I could speak for Dino by saying we were both scared to death. I had been there for a year and a half telling people I could be a ring announcer, and if I couldn't be a ring announcer, that was it. I was done. I might as well go home, pack my bags, never see the business again as anything but a fan. That was my time to put up or shut up, and I was literally shaking. But I think what happened was we both sucked so bad that they figured, well, Penzer's coming up anyway. We might as well use him. We don't have to pay two people to come up from Florida.
So was that after Gary Capetta was released?
It was after, no, Gary was still there. Tony, I could see the guy's face. They had a second string ring announcer that was from the Carolinas. That was their young guy. And hopefully I'll remember his name before we're done. But he got caught stealing money. He was renting cars and putting the money in his pocket. So they fired him and they needed somebody else. But Gary was still the main guy. I was just the B guy. I did the B house shows. I did the B TV tapings, the Worldwide and the Pro, WCW Pro.
And who was in charge of WCW at that time?
It would change on a regular basis. Ole would be in charge, and then Dusty would be in charge, and then Flair would be in charge, and then they brought Watson, and then that didn't work out, and until it was like a never-ending. I just called everybody boss and did my job, and didn't bother to get involved in any of that kind of stuff at that point.
Well, just to go through some of those people, because everyone likes to hear about them.
Sure.
Ole Anderson, everyone has different opinions on him. What was he like to deal with?
Ole Anderson was a straight shooter. You know where you stood for him, with him. So, if your feelings get hurt easily, and somebody tells you had a crappy match or I don't like you very much, then he probably wasn't a nice guy. But I respect somebody like that. Not everybody has a perfect day. He didn't really talk to me a lot because, unless I was sort of, even back when I became the second string ring announcer, I was still sort of the running errand guy, the walking man, as Junkyard Dog would speak. So unless they needed somebody, really, it took me a couple of years to get ingratiated to where they accepted me as more than just the errand guy, run off go run off the shows for so that you could pass it out to all the agents and all the talent. That was one of my jobs too. When they were done writing the shows, I would run them off and make everybody copies. So, just menial stuff, but it got me where it got me. So.
And what did you think about Dusty Rhodes as a backstage person? He always seemed to be backstage for so many companies. So.
Yeah, Dusty was one of my heroes. So working for one of my heroes is amazing. He was always nice to me. Towards the end, the WCW used to tease me and tell me they was going to give me Tony Schiavone's spot as a play-by-play guy. Who knows if that would have really happened. I did do some but not to get ahead of ourselves. I did do some play-by-play on the European Nitros. They had to re-voice the European Nitros, and they had me do it with Larry Zbyszko. And he carried me. If I had to do it myself, it would have lasted 5 minutes, and they'd have kicked me out of the studio. But Larry carried me, and I used a different name because I was pitching to myself, because we were re-voicing last week's night show. So if I had to say, let's go to David Penzer, it wouldn't have worked. So I used a different name. I did that for a while, and Larry really carried me. So who knows, I could have done something, but I know we're getting ahead of the story.
And since you bring up Larry's name, what did you think about him overall as a performer and commentator?
Look, Larry's famous for stalling. That's what he does. That's how he gets his heat. I don't think he'd say that wasn't true. Once he could go, he could go. He could go. He liked to stall, but once it got time to go to work, he went to work. But super guy, funny guy, personable guy, and if WCW hadn't ended the way it did, who knows? I mean, his carrying me doing those international nitros could have given me a play-by-play job. I mean, I'll forever be indebted, because you don't know how it could have worked out. Just because it didn't go anywhere doesn't mean it wouldn't have.
Why do you think WWE never used him as a commentator?
I think that there's heat going way back.
Yeah.
And I'd be lying if I said I know. It's the same thing with Randy Savage. There's stories that go around about why Vince has certain heat with guys, but I don't really know. But I don't think that he was one of Vince's favorite people.
And you brought up Bill Watts' name. What did you think of that infamous run?
I stayed as far away from Bill Watts as I could when he was there. He ruled with an iron fist. His goal was he was brought in there to save money, and rumor is he got a percentage of every dollar he saved. So I didn't want him making money off of saving me. So if Bill Watts was in that dressing room, I went to that dressing room. And if Bill Watts was out in front by the ring, I went back to the dressing room. I don't want to say I hid, but I'd be lying if I didn't say that.
Do you have any stories about him that you may have witnessed from that time?
No, it's just that at the time, everybody thought he was a genius. The stuff he did in Louisiana and Universal was so spot on, and we were all so excited that when they brought him on, thinking that this guy was going to be the savior, finally, we're going to find somebody who's a genius, who knows how to do pro wrestling. And then he did all this stuff like, you can't do moves off the top rope, when you had guys like Brian Pillman doing all this crazy stuff that was catching on, and a DQ, all kinds of DQ stuff, and he brought guys in, and I'm not going to mention their names, that you wouldn't think would be the guys that would spark a territory. A lot of them were were veterans, and it had their run and brought them back. So it was just strange, because everybody celebrated, and then we watched what evolved and said, what happened to the guy that was supposed to come here? Because he's not here. It's a different guy.
And what did you think of his pushing of his son?
Look, Eric was a nice enough guy. He's, in those situations, I don't blame the kids. I blame the father. The father should. I don't know Bill Watts. He probably wouldn't know me if I walked up to him, because I hid from him, like I told you.
Yeah.
But his father knows better. You don't put a kid in that situation and push him down everybody's throat. I mean, not jumping ahead, but you can see what's going on with Roman Reigns now over the last couple of years, and what happens when you try to push someone down your throat. And Roman Reigns has way more, I don't even want to say charisma, because Eric was a charismatic guy, but way more experience and talent. And it wasn't that Eric didn't have talent, it's that nobody gave him a chance to learn the talent. They trained him for 3 weeks and put him out there and said, Michael Hayes, put him over. Arn Anderson, put him over. Bobby Eaton, make him look like $1 million, which they did. But there's only so much you could do when the guy has no experience.
And you mentioned Arn Anderson putting him over. Rick Steiner told us a story about Scott kind of snapping backstage after Arn Anderson had to put Eric Watts over, and I guess Scott confronted Bill Watts, and there was a blow up, and that led to the Steiners leaving WCW. Were you around for that?
I sort of remember the altercation. I believe that was at a worldwide taping, and I was in the ring announcing, so I had just heard about it over the headset. But I normally would have avoided situations like that anyway. But I remember that Scotty left, and then a couple of weeks, 3 weeks later, Rick left that, and I think they went to the WWE after that. Look, guys like Arn and Bobby Eaton and Michael Hayes were very well respected guys. And it's not that you're asking them to put somebody over; it's you're asking them to put somebody over who has 2 weeks in the business and is the Booker's son. And everybody but the Booker knows he doesn't deserve it. Even Eric knew he didn't deserve it. So you had to feel bad for the guy. But Scott Steiner's a hothead. He's still a hothead. I still deal with him on the Legends of Wrestling stuff that I work with every once in a while, and he's still a hothead, and he could be. So, you just have to deal with the personalities you're given. But yeah, I remember the story. I was in the ring when it happened.
Were you around? I guess you're probably in the ring for this too, but when DDP came after Scott backstage, after Scott did the promo where he brought up Kimberly.
Yeah, I remember hearing a lot of that kind of stuff. I got to hear the producers talking about it on the headset, just as well not being around that kind of stuff anyway. For that one I was in the ring as well. I don't remember if that was a Nitro or a Thunder, but I was definitely out there. And Scott was I say this with all respect, but by that time Scott was a lot out of control. I don't know if I don't know what his deal was, but he was playing a character that was out of control, and I think almost like Brian Pillman did, he was trying to live the character, but sometimes you got to know when to rein it in, when it's just you and the boys, and when it's a shoot situation. And I don't know, I think Scott was trying to push the envelope a little bit, like when Brian did it, and it caused a lot of tension back in the day. But back in that part, by that time, all what had broken loose in WCW when it came to personality clashes. So, I mean, that was a physical one, but there were so many personality clashes going on at the time. Scott hated Ric Flair, Piper hated Kevin Nash. I mean, there was so much stuff going on back then. It was so dysfunctional that was a physical situation, and there weren't a lot of physical situations, but that was hardly the only dysfunctional situation going on between the top talent.
There was something with Scott and Terry Taylor too, apparently, where he threw a TV at Terry Taylor.
Yeah, and that one really affected me because we were doing a live Thunder, and I was out, counting down the crowd. All right, we're going live in 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. They start the Thunder theme. The fireworks go off. Thunder, and everything stops because they had that altercation. And if I tell you that it was a 40-minute break before we got the next talent out, it was probably an hour. And it was me. I was in that ring, left to entertain a crowd that had just been hyped up for a live Thunder. It wasn't live, sorry, it was pre-taped, because we pre-taped it for the night before. But for a Thunder, and with the fireworks going off and everything, and then dead silence. I don't know if you know the story, but I turned myself heel on the crowd that night.
No.
I got so desperate. I got so desperate after a while. It was when Diamond Dallas Page was promoting his book. And I actually pulled an Andy Kaufman. Do you remember Andy Kaufman used to sometimes read a book to his audiences and tell everybody? Now, I didn't want, so I got so desperate towards the end that I started, his book was on the table of the Tony Schiavone and those guys to promote. I started reading a chapter of Diamond Dallas Page's book to the audience, and they were throwing stuff at me, and I'm looking at the camera going, please, you got to help me out here. Finally, it got going again. And, people ask me about that because, but that was, if you were to ask me one of the tougher scenarios that you've been in the business, when a crowd is that excited, having to stall for 40 minutes, it wasn't easy. I did every trick in the book, every trick I had ever learned from Gary Capetta, Michael Buffer, and, everybody else I had ever seen.
Scott Hall, what was he like? Because towards the end they were doing a character where he was drunk all the time and kind of out of it, but how close was that to real life? Because we saw in later years that he has serious, I think him and Sonny hold the record for rehab for... you never could tell back then with Scott if he was working it or if he was real or if it was somewhere in between. I think a lot of times it was somewhere in between. He wasn't as bad as he was acting, but he wasn't totally acting, you know what I mean? I like Scott Hall. Scott is always good to me. Every time I see him, he says hello. I think Scott gained a lot of respect for me because we were walking to a bar after a show in the Alamo Dome in San Antonio. And I don't know if you've ever been to San Antonio, but all the downtown is connected with all these rivers and stuff. It's called a Riverwalk section. And we were with a whole group of people, some wrestlers, some producers. And Scott Hall said, "Penzer, you say that one more time, I'm going to push you in the lake." I said, "You don't got the balls to push me in the lake." Knowing I was going in the lake, but I was just in one of those moods. And he, boom, pushed me in the lake. And I didn't say a bad word about it. I got up, I went and took a shower, put on new clothes, met him at the bar, and he bought me a drink. And I think after that, Scott realized that, I could hang with the guys because I dared him, he did it, and I never said another word about it. And back then, a lot of guys were moaning about everything. So I think I earned a little bit of his respect when I didn't moan and bitch about it. And you brought up Brian Pillman's name. Did you have much contact with him?
Yeah, a little bit. When I was first doing the house shows, when I first got the job, he was on most of the house shows. Brian was a kind of a hyper guy. He's a nice enough guy, very talented. It just got weird when he started doing that shoot stuff with Eric at Disney, and when we were at Disney, and he went off the rails, and that whole period. I know a lot of what was shoot and a lot of what was real. But there's still blurry lines that I don't know that anybody except the particulars involved know anything about. There was stuff with Brian, there was stuff with Benoit and Nancy and Kevin, and there was a lot of stuff going on there so I tried to again, I think you'll see a theme when things get up with me. I tried to stay away from the heat, because when you're the low-level guy and you get caught up in the heat, you're usually the one that gets cut, even if it wasn't your fault.
And Eric Bischoff, obviously, he got put in charge while you were working there. Were you shocked that they put basically one of their third-string announcers in charge of WCW at that time?
Was I surprised? Yeah. I know a lot of the people that were going for that job and had a lot more experience than him, had a lot of respect for a lot of those people that interviewed for that job. And I don't think there was anybody that wasn't surprised. I would think Eric would tell you that he was shocked that he got that opportunity. Eric didn't talk to me a lot. One time he said, "I've changed, Penzer, how you doing? Come over here. I've changed the format, and I'm going to have the ring announcers talk over you. Is that okay?" I said, "As long as my check clears, I'm a company guy. You could talk over me, let me talk, announce, whatever." He never said a lot to me. I never said a lot to him. When things got really big, Eric was under a lot of pressure. And the last person he wanted to talk to was the ring announcer. He had to deal with meetings with all those egos. So, he wouldn't even really say hello. And sometimes actually, that could be frustrating when your boss, walks by you with his head down, he came through for me when it counted. He came through for me when it was time for raises, and when forget about your ego being bruised because the boss didn't say hello to you or gave you a dirty look. He came through for me when my family and my money and that kind of stuff was on the line.
Were you there when he gave that infamous speech about Ric Flair, that he was going to make Ric Flair's family starve and all that? I
was there for that speech. I was there for the speech in Las Vegas where all the guys walked out. Conan and
I didn't hear about this one. I don't think. Is that where he said if you want to get out of your contract, you can leave?
Yeah, you could leave. He was. Look,
Raven left that meeting too, I think, didn't he?
Who?
Raven.
Raven left. Perry Saturn left. Rey Mysterio. A lot of guys left. There was a lot of books have been written about and series have been made about the Monday Night Wars, and I could tell you my advantage of things watching it there, being at every night show and every Thunder and almost every house show is. But what I could tell you is there was just everybody was making a ton of money. Everybody thought they deserved to be a top guy. There wasn't room enough for everybody to become a top guy, and Eric was under so much pressure, and he'd probably be the first one to tell you a lot of times he didn't handle it well. Back then, he was just under a lot of pressure, and he wasn't the best at controlling that. And he would get angry, or he would get moody, and it is what it is. It's a business.
And I guess Eric would have been in charge when you were made into the main ring announcer for WCW.
Yeah, Gary Capetta warned me that it was coming. He told me for weeks. For months, actually, "You're going to be the guy." "No, I'm not, Gary. You're not leaving." I'm like, "No, you're going to be the guy." Gary's beef, and he could correct me if I'm wrong, but Gary's beef mostly was he didn't like the fact that Michael Buffer did the main event and got so much more money. He felt like he was being the second fiddle guy to Michael Buffer going out and doing Let's Get Ready to Rumble. And
how much was Michael Buffer paid for that?
I don't know, but I'd say probably somewhere between, depending on when he was doing it and what type of show, and I'm just totally guessing, somewhere between $5 and $50,000. I could be, somewhere in the middle of that. I'm sure not less than 5 and no more than 50 probably. Gary was tired of it. But I didn't think Gary would leave a 6-figure job in the business he loved over that. But he did. And he taught me a lot on his way out of, what
are some of the tricks he taught you?
Well, there's just ways to some of these tapings were 3-hour tapings, so we would do things like tell the crowd that there's an applause meter in the truck, and that we're going to rate you against the top 5 other cities of the year, and build up slowly. Okay, you just beat New York. Now you still have Los Angeles, Nashville, and Tampa to beat, finally before the main event. If you make a lot of noise, you're going to become the greatest audience. And Gary made that up, and I asked him if I could steal it from him because it worked. It's funny how things work. You look back at it, it's ridiculous that Jacksonville, Florida would beat a crowd in New York City, but they bought it. You know, they wanted to believe it, and just like the fans got hyped up in the storyline, they got hyped up in thinking they were going to be the best crowd. So I ripped that off from him. I won't deny it. It came in handy a lot of times. The key was you had to do it between matches, so it didn't work on that one Thunder thing because there were no matches out there.
So I guess Eric Bischoff was the one that gave you the job for that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even think he ever really told me. He might have come up to me and said, "You're the main guy," and I just think I found out because Gary wasn't going to be there anymore, and nobody told me that I wasn't going to be taking his place. So I think the first show I said, "I'm assuming I'm doing the ring announcing," and I think probably Tony Schiavone said, "Yep."
I guess before we get into the Nitros, you told me that you recently watched the shoot interview we did with Vader, and you heard him talking about his infamous.
I like Leon.
Yeah.
He's a nice guy. And I'm sure he's an even nicer guy now because he was, under a lot of pressure back then, and he was a moody kind of guy. And I went back and I recently, in this last week, I listened to what Vader said again, Leon. And so what I will tell you about Leon's part, he came into the center stage. I didn't know he was doing photo shoots before that. That was news to me. I take him at his word for that. He was in a horrible mood. Now you have to understand, we're doing television that's going to air on the Superstation that you're basing your entire pay-per-view and house shows off of. And you got a spot called Interview with Vader to promote whatever it was at the time. And that spot has to be filled sometime in the night. And you're running out of time as a production team. You're running out of time to fill that spot. And since he's in the main event, you can't really replace it. So I was the one still running it, guys, for interviews, and it was Paul Orndorff, Terry Taylor, Kevin Sullivan, and Tony Schiavone, who were sort of in charge of trying to figure out what to do because they were desperate to get Vader, who's the one interview they had left. And they originally asked me, go ask Leon that we need to do this promo. It's the only promo we have left. I don't remember exactly what Leon said to me, but it was more of the lines of get lost. And I'm being nice. Probably using words I can't use here. And so I went out. Well, I didn't want to stooge the guy off, but they wanted an answer. So I said, what happened? He goes, I don't think he's coming anytime soon. They go, why? I said, he just seems to be in a bad mood. And so then Terry Taylor, that part was true. Terry Taylor went. I sort of tagged along with Terry Taylor, and he sort of gave the same lip service to Terry Taylor and indicated there wasn't a very positive chance of that happening anytime soon. Well, Paul, who was also part of the team at the time, Paul's like, this guy's being a prima donna. This is wrestling. We got a show to do. He needs to come out and do an interview. He's a big star. Be a man. Do the interview. I don't care what's going on in your life. And so he went and he asked. Him and Vader got into it. They moved into an office where it was just them. Okay, and I heard a lot of back and forth. There was a fight. I didn't see the fight. I'm not going to say I heard the fight. But when Leon, I love you. I hope you live another 50 years. I'm praying for you. But when he says that the bad arm hit him and didn't hurt him, when Leon White came out of that room, his face looked like it exploded. There was Orndorff must have got him right in the right place. His whole face, not only his nose and his cheeks, his whole face looked like it exploded. You ever see the gray black bins that they would put ice in, put water in so that you get. He threw all the water out of one of those bins. It was just ice and melted ice. Held his breath probably for about 15 minutes and would go under, to try to get the swelling to go down. So, Leon, I love you, but when you said he didn't hurt you, your face looked like it exploded. I'm sorry. That's just the truth. I was asked to tell you the true story, and that is the true story as I've seen it.
And there's been a lot of controversy of, I guess maybe Steve Austin started this rumor that Paul was wearing flip-flops.
He was.
Okay.
He was wearing flip-flops, and I think because Paul did get hit first, apparently. He admits that. I just saw Paul at WrestleCade, and he was telling Bob Orton's story at the bar. But he admits that he got knocked down first, and he says it was because he was wearing flip-flops. I don't know if that's a true story or not. All I know is at one point, Paul Orndorff got one very good punch, and Leon's face looks like it exploded. I'm not saying that Leon's not a tough guy. I'm not saying that he doesn't remember it the exact way it happened, because memory is a funny thing, You like to remember different things different ways. But I
But
saw.
why would he be wearing flip-flops if he was an agent? That was one point that Vader brought up. Like if he was acting as an agent.
Back then, they didn't dress up.
Okay.
No, back then Kevin Sullivan would wear shorts and a t-shirt, and back then you didn't have to dress up to be an agent. It's not like WWE now or even WCW. Terry Taylor used to dress up. That's just Terry Taylor's style. He's a stylish guy, but everybody else was in jeans and sneakers, or your outfit was your outfit in front of the camera. If you worked in front of the camera, behind the camera, nobody cared.
And was there any truth to the part where Ming held Vader back at the end? Because that was.
I think that is true.
Yeah.
I think that he went in and broke it up.
Okay.
Look, I'm not saying that Leon White might not have been a tougher SOB on that day than Paul Orndorff, because Paul Orndorff did have a bad show. I'm not saying. I'm telling you that Paul Orndorff got in one good punch, and it made Leon's face look like it exploded. That's all I'm saying.
Just while I brought up Ming, do you have any stories about Ming? Our fans always love to hear about him.
Scariest guy in the world, but the nicest guy in the world. He could be, look, when 98% of the people in the business are afraid of you, you pretty much could get your own way. And he never took advantage of that. He never used it. He never abused it. He was the nicest guy, still is the nicest guy when I see him. In a business, in a physical business, a lot of times when you have superior physical skills, or be able to take almost anybody at your will down, guys can take advantage of that sometime. And I never saw him take advantage of that. I know he's gotten in fights on the road, back in the day, and gotten sued and stuff against fans in bars and stuff. When I had met him, wasn't drinking anymore, because he had said that was what would make him go off. But always a gentleman. I had him over to my house for 4th of July barbecues, great to my wife and kids. I got nothing bad to say about Ming. And like most probably everybody you've interviewed has said, probably other than Barbarian, the toughest guy. And Barbarian and Ming would have to fight to see who's tougher, but the two toughest guys probably in the business history.
Another guy we interviewed, Al Snow, talked to us about his WCW tryout, and he seemed to think at the time of his tryout, I don't know if you remember it, but he claimed that he thought you stooged him off or something to the office. He didn't go into many details other than that, but he said he thought the reason that the tryout didn't go so well could have been because of you, but he didn't go into much further detail.
Yeah, I watched that actually at the time, not having any idea I'd ever sit in front of these cameras. I watched that at the time. I can't remember what he's talking about. I can't imagine what I could have done. I didn't have clout back then. Towards the end, I had this much clout. I booked the match, not to get ahead of ourselves, I booked a triple threat match between 3 Count and Young Dragons and whatever the two left from the other teams. I actually came up with the idea of that match. So a little tiny bit of clout. When Eric gave WCW Saturday Night to Tony and Shivani, Jimmy Hart, Arn Anderson, and myself, I had a little bit, of input. Back then I had no clout. So I don't understand what he thinks I would have done. I will tell Al I have the utmost respect for him, and if I did anything, I'm sorry. I'm not perfect, but I'd love to talk to you down the road. I don't recall what I did.
When the WCW started Nitro, what were your thoughts on the whole idea of going head-to-head with Raw? Because I believe you're the only person from that company that was actually at every single Nitro.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Only person. We were excited. We were nervous. I mean, this was our shot. Sort of like, I'm comparing apples to oranges, but sort of like when my story about when they said, okay, you could have a tryout as a ring announcer. I had been saying I could do the job for so long and I could compete, and if I couldn't have competed, then it was over. The experiment was done. So on a much larger level, it was like that. We've been trying to get our opportunity to compete with WWFE, whatever it was at the time, for so long. Well, now's your shot. You're live. You're head to head. And if it wasn't going to work, if it didn't work, there's a very good chance that either Turner would have gotten rid of the company at that point, or at the very least, it just would have been a small regional Southeast company, just because Ted, and for no other reason at that point, that Ted always appreciated that wrestling got him to where he was, starting CNN and TBS and all the thing. Wrestling ratings basically got him on the map. So, but yeah, I mean, it was taking a big risk, so it was exciting. I never thought we'd do as good as we did at the beginning. I think everybody was shocked that we came so close. Luger coming out under those circumstances was brilliant. It really started the back and forth of, can you top this? Of stealing somebody or doing something that's going to shock the people or surprise the people, and which was good because especially back then when the internet was starting to take off and the cheat sheets were prevalent, most people knew what was going on. So when you could do something live to shock the people, well, that was fun. It was fun for the company to be able to pull that off, and I think it was even more fun for the fans to be surprised because a lot of people want to know. But then when they know, it's like, oh, now I know. It's like I've been following this Kenny Omega. Was he staying with New Japan? I've never even seen Kenny Omega wrestle, but apparently he's a big-time New Japan guy thinking about going to WWE. So the fans want to know, are you going to WWE? Well, if you tell them yes and he debuts as a surprise, you gave away the secret. So sometimes you can't have your cake and eat it too. So I thought it was cool that back in the day,
either way, he won't be the rating savior. I could tell you.
I've never seen a Kenny Omega match. I'm just using him as an example. AJ last year. I think a surprise is good sometimes. I know everybody wants to know all the inner workings, and I get that. I'm a nosy guy myself, but sometimes it's good to have a good surprise. And so those surprises and trying to top this and top that. When Scott Hall walked down those steps in Macon, Georgia, I'll never forget it. One of the two top Nitro moments that, in my opinion, we knew he was coming, but we didn't know in what way. So I mean, that was unbelievable.
So that was a total surprise to you.
Well, I mean, we knew that those guys were coming in.
Yeah.
I mean, nobody told me specifically, but that was the rumors going around. And we knew they had left WWF, and they did the curtain call. So where else would they be going? But nobody knew how they were gonna. The big question is, he can't be Razor Ramon. He can't be Diesel. What are they gonna do? So I had no idea. Being in the business and seeing how the business is booked, you think, oh, they're gonna come in and they're gonna enter themselves in the title picture. We want the tag team titles or we want the world title. When he came in and played off the whole scheme Gene thing and the whole acted like we're coming to invade you, I don't know that I've ever been as very few times in the wrestling business, and I've been watching wrestling. I'm 50, so since I was 12. So do the math. I'm horrible at math. I don't know that I've ever been as caught up in the moment as when I realized what they were about to do with these guys coming in, playing off the scheme Gene and that angle from WWE, and doing an invasion. To me, it still gives me goosebumps.
And what was the backstage environment like at WCW's peak? Because I understand there was a lot of cliques back there and a lot of partying too. And
I think at first when we started catching fire, when NWO was catching fire and we're selling out domes, and I think at first everybody's high on loving life. Everybody's making a lot of money. Ratings are great. We're beating the company that was the top company for years. We're selling out huge stadiums. We're selling out our house shows way in advance, which we never did before. I think it was exciting. But then, like with anything, the egos get involved. And it started slowly and built up. And we all know the story of the different stories about Scott and Kevin and Piper and Hulk and creative control and all that. There's a million stories. Like I said, books have been written about it, and miniseries have been documented on networks. But at first it was fun. We were having a blast. And then just little things started happening. I remember one time we were in Tupelo, Mississippi. It was sold out, and we never sold out Tupelo, Mississippi. And the main event was Sting and Randy Savage against Hall and Nash, the Outsiders. Well, back in the day, everybody carried their music on cassette tape. So, and I don't know that I've ever told this story, actually. So, I was in charge of setting up the music, and usually the guy was at ringside, so I had some control, but this guy was in a booth way up there. So their tape was usually the tapes were one-off tapes where it was just that one song that the company would give me, that the theme song they did. Well, they found some cool song that they thought sounded cool. It was like a rap, kind of bluesy song, but it was in the middle of like a full cassette tape. So it was like, you remember cassette tapes, right? A lot of people watching this could be like, what cassette tape? So it was like side A, cut 3. So I prepared it, side A, cut 3, and I told the guy, when I point to you, play side A, cut 3. Well, you put in side B. So the wrong music is playing. So I'm trying to get on the headset and a microphone and a walkie-talkie to fix it. Well, by then, he if you remember the way cassette tapes go, by then he had changed the spot because he put in the wrong side. This went on, and this was a house show. This went on for like 20, 30 minutes. I'm not kidding you, trying to get their song. And I guess, I wasn't there, but I guess at one point, Sting said to those guys, dude, just go out.
It was Hall and Nash?
Yeah, just go out. How long are we going to wait? And they said, but we need our music. And Sting said, it's only Tupelo, Mississippi. Well, Hall and Nash went back to Eric and said, this is the reason why you guys have done so poorly, because you don't value, you think it's only Tupelo. Sting didn't mean it like that, but Eric gave a whole big meeting to everybody this was on a Saturday, that Monday at Nitro, that I don't care if it's a show before 1,000 people, 10,000 people, live TV, if it was a house show, whatever, we're going to put on the greatest show we could, and I never want to hear it's only Tupelo again. I think at that point, Hall and Nash had seen the successes that Vince had, were trying to show the guys in WCW that there were things that they were doing that could be improved. But I think at that point that it might have, you had the mainstays in WCW, the Lugers and the Stings, and then you had the new guys coming in that are, and I think it might have started. It wasn't any big fight. Everybody laughs about it now. It's only Tupelo. It's something everybody laughs about around the bar if Sting and Hall and Nash or whoever are around. But at the time, I think some feelings were hurt, and that could have started a lot of it.
And what was Hogan like backstage? Because we've always heard a lot of conflicting reports about it.
When he first got there, he stayed totally away from most of the talent. He had his own dressing room. He's always been nice to me. Again, I think you're sensing the theme. I stay away from back then I stayed away. I wasn't working with him. I wasn't creating stories for him. I wasn't telling, look, the guy has an ego. He's Hulk Hogan. And so does Kevin Nash, and so does Roddy Piper. All these guys have egos. I don't know if Vince McMahon just has a unique way of controlling the egos, or if somebody at WCW let the egos get out of control. I'm not exactly sure how it happened, because I wasn't behind the scenes. I was just seeing the outward, I wasn't in the rooms. I'm seeing the tension and I'm driving at that point with Kevin Sullivan, and he's talking about, I'm not going to convince this guy to do this with this guy and this guy to do this with this guy. So I didn't know their personal beefs, but I knew that there were issues with getting guys to do certain things. So, Hulk was always, from the first day I ever said, hi, my name is David Penzer, I'm the ring announcer, always cool with me. But again, he stayed away a lot of the time. He stayed in his own room. Really didn't come down to the bar all that much after the shows. Sometimes he did. Usually he'd hang out with Eric or Savage or, those guys. So I hung out with my own little crew of, grunge and Jericho and Eddie Guerrero and Benoit and Dean Malenko and people like that. So,
Do you think that one of Eric's downfalls was letting people like Hogan get in his ear too much and Hall and Nash, rather than sticking to the people that helped get him to the dance?
Well, and that's why I said Vince McMahon might have the secret. Maybe the secret is you put your foot down, you say you don't like it, there's the door. I was never in those meetings. I don't know if Eric said that. The problem was Hogan had creative control. So you couldn't say, if you don't like it, here's the door. So what you had to do was you had to convince the other guys going along for them to do it, because they didn't have creative control. So if there's an angle with Hulk and Randy and Kevin and Scott, and Hulk says, I'm putting my foot down, this is what I'm doing, I'm not doing anything different, then Eric has to go out there and say, guys, we need to make this work because Hulk has creative control. And that's where I would assume tensions arise, because you got one guy that could put and I'm sure Vince McMahon would never let anybody say, I'm putting my foot down, this is it, I'm doing this. So I think that by giving Hulk creative control, and I understand why he did it, because he needed a Hulk Hogan at the time. He needed Hulk Hogan to make WCW legitimate. We were going downhill fast back when he took over. But I think once the whole thing got really big, and all these egos were part, and he started getting all this talent from all these from that were jumping from WWE down here and all that. I think that it became the creative control became a real problem.
And what was Savage like, Randy Savage?
Savage sort of stayed to himself as well. Savage was kind of a moody guy, rest his soul. You never knew which Randy you were going to get. The thing I had going for me is I had a younger sister who was adopted from Korea, and we did a show at in Tallahassee, and she was going to Florida State at the time, and he had a big crush on her. But my thing with Randy was, how's your sister? I can't do a Randy Savage impression. Penzer, how's your sister? Oh, she's doing good. I'll tell you said hi. Please do. So I always had a little bit of advantage, because I think he thought maybe if we ever went to Tallahassee again, you never know. But
nothing ever happened there, I guess.
Oh, no, it was a huge age difference. I mean, she was 18 years old, 19 years old, and he was 40. But she was flattered, don't get me wrong.
With the Elizabeth stories you heard, you probably weren't really wanting that to happen, I guess.
I never really thought it seriously, but he thought she was pretty, and my sister was flattered, and it was just a form, kind of a joking type of thing. Hey Penzer, how's your sister? Tell her I said hi. But it kind of got me in a more personal situation with Randy than a lot of the lower level guys got. So we would kid around about it. It might lead to other discussions about, hey, what do you think of that? What do you think of this? How'd you think this match went? So sort of an opening.
And now that I think about Elizabeth, did you ever hear what exactly was the issue with her and Luger when she passed away? I guess there was some confusion that he may have had something to do with her death.
I don't know. Look, a lot of guys in this business got into trouble with addiction. I mean, it's not a secret. I'm not telling you anything that's going to shock anybody. It's very hard to go out and perform night after night. Forget the bumps and the bruises that you get, and forget the pain, but there's, even for me as just a ring announcer, there's a level of adrenaline at 11 o'clock at night when you're hosting a live show in front of 10,000 people. And, I always got my biggest adrenaline pump the first time when I went out and said, good evening, fill in the blank city. And, you'd always got an automatic cheap pop. And, and so at 10 o'clock, 10:30 at night, there's nothing to do with that in most of these towns with that adrenaline. You go back, we would go back, most of the people I knew would go back and drink, have some whiskey or some vodka, beer, and try to wind down, because you got to wind down. And if you throw the pain in there, and you throw the marked doctors that would write you a script for anything you asked for, anytime, there were a lot of people that got them, again, no secret, that got themselves in with problems with somas and pain pills, and well, look, let's be honest, I lost a lot of friends based on that. The business lost a lot of great people based on that. WWE, no matter what you think of them, has stepped up and offers free rehab to anybody who ever was a wrestler, pretty much, and has probably saved a lot of lives, and I give them all the credit in the world. So I don't know exactly what happened with Lex and Elizabeth, but apparently they got caught up in that whole addiction, and unfortunately it took a bad series of events for Lex to be able to pull himself out of that. And Lex, I'll give him a compliment. He pulled himself out of a really low situation in a lot of ways, and is really living a real nice Christian life right now, and he seems to be happy, and that's good. But I think they got pretty low at that point. Things got pretty dark.
And you mentioned that you used to drive with Kevin Sullivan on occasion. Were you driving with him during the whole situation with him and Benoit, when Benoit, I guess, basically took his wife away from him?
Yes, and that was interesting. They tried to kayfabe it from me, and I used to drive with me and a guy named Pee Wee Anderson. He was a referee. They tried to, well, first it was an angle, then the angle turned real. And I don't know exactly when the angle turned real. I was riding with Kevin. I was friends with Chris. I ended up living in the same city in Atlanta, Peachtree City, with Chris when him and Nancy were together. The wrestlers that lived in that city were me, Fit Finley, Steve Regal, William Regal, and Chris. And we would hang out together. And there was another cameraman who was Darwin, who was a longtime cameraman who lived out there. So we would all hang out together on the weekends or during the week when it wouldn't work.
We'd be on flights together. Like that.
Yeah. But also socialize, like, you know, on like if we had a Saturday night off, we'd all go to the local Japanese steakhouse and, you know, drink and sing karaoke and stuff. And I got to see things. I got to see a side of. We got to see, those people got to see a side of Chris that nobody else ever thought. I don't want to jump ahead of any question you might have, but Chris was a nice guy, great talent, but there was always something that was a little bit off. And so
Rene Dupree actually told us in our interview with him that when he saw Chris consume alcohol, he saw a glimpse into a different side of him.
Drink what?
Alcohol, like when Chris would have alcohol in him.
I don't even know that it was alcohol, but there was another side of Chris, and we all saw it. And I don't know if you remember. I don't want to jump ahead.
We'll cover the Chris Benoit.
Yeah, the answer to your question is I was driving with Kevin. It was very uncomfortable. I don't know when it got real and when it got and when it wasn't. But there were several uncomfortable situations that I was in that not for any fault of any of the parties, just, you know, the way things happened. There was several uncomfortable situations that I was put in that I obviously wish that I wasn't a part of, but unfortunately I was, and the rest is history.
And what are your views on what happened with Chris and Nancy? Because I guess you must have known Nancy pretty well as well.
What ultimately happened? Yeah. Well, if you watch the tribute that the WWE did to Chris when they didn't know what had happened, everybody talked glowingly about Chris. Chris was very popular. Chris was a nice guy, a fun guy. He liked to rib people. You know, he quiet for the most part, but could be a fun guy. But there was a side of Chris, and I mentioned again, we saw a side of him in Peachtree City, that little group in Peachtree City. Johnny Grunge was part of that group, by the way, too, which is an important part of the whole story that others didn't see. And when I was taking a nap the day that we found out it all happened, and when my son woke me up, same house I live in right now, and when my son woke me up and said, Chris and Nancy and Daniel are dead, first thing that went through my head is, did he kill her or did she kill him? Didn't have a thought in the world that it was anything else. But if you look back at that tape, William Regal said, I don't want to talk about Chris the person, I want to talk Chris the wrestler, because he knew the same thing. He was in that clique. And it's sad. It's sad that they had very slowly taken themselves out of that group and start to really be private. Even to that group that we used to hang out with. They moved to a different house. None of us knew that. He had put up big gates. None of us knew that. The only one they felt comfortable talking to, Chris and Nancy, about any of their issues, was Johnny Grunge. Johnny Grunge was a fun guy, kind of a screw-up, you know, did a lot of, you know, drank a lot, got in trouble, stupid stuff. Nancy knew him from ECW. Chris knew him from WCW. And I think that Chris and Nancy were very concerned that people would think that there was something wrong with them because they were having problems. So they didn't want to share their problems with any of their friends. So the one guy they could both go to was Grunge, because Grunge was kind of the screw-up, fun guy, and he was never going to, you know, think anything bad about them, and he helped them a lot of time. And I truly believe, to this day, without a doubt in my mind, that if Johnny Grunge didn't die, that Chris and Nancy and Daniel would be alive. He was their only go-to outlet, and when he passed, they had nowhere else to go. And it's just really sad. What do you say about it? There are people that just lose, that are off a little bit, and they click. We hear about it every day, whether it's, you know, some guy shooting up a mall or you know, all the crazy stories we hear. Unfortunately, I used to be friends with one of them.
And what do you say about all these idiots out there that I guess are just super Chris Benoit fans that claim that this is all a big conspiracy and Kevin Sullivan had something to do with this?
I say that they need to go back and find another conspiracy, because there's not a chance. There's more of a chance than Donald Trump is working for Vladimir Putin as we speak. Than that happened. It's absolutely. Look, I saw it with my own eyes. People saw it with their own eyes. The dysfunction that they had, pulling away, all the symptoms, like I told you. When I was informed what happened, I didn't have a doubt that one killed the other. My only sadness was that Daniel didn't survive. He didn't deserve it. And look, let's be honest. And not that Nancy was a great person and a good friend. Nancy was rough. Nancy was a tough girl. Nancy could go at it too. So it wasn't like Chris was beating his wife and Nancy's going. They were pulling back and forth at each other, and it was almost like who's going to flip, who's going to really go overboard over the edge first. And you hope that they would be able to make it work. But like I said, if Grunge was alive, there's not a doubt in that night, whatever happened, Chris would have left, would have driven to Grunge's, and they would have talked. And then Chris would have come home, Nancy would have driven to Grunge's, they would have talked, and then 2 days later, all three of them would have laughed about it. Not a doubt in my mind. So.
And there was some rumors that I guess came out that apparently the son wasn't really sick, but there were some rumors at the time of the death that there were some health issues with the son.
He was small for his size, but so was Chris's other adult boy at that age. I never got the real story on that. To be honest with you, they were talking about some syndrome that he had. I had never heard that. Once a story becomes out in the open like that in this day and age of social media and the 24-hour news cycle, the Nancy Graces of the world went to town on it, and so much stuff came out. Everybody's yearning for information. I actually turned down 3 requests to do not 60 minutes, 48 hours. They went after everybody in his clique, and nobody would do it. And I wouldn't have talked to you about this back then, only because it's been so much time, and so many others have spoke about, different Chris's. Do I feel comfortable telling what I saw and what I think? Back at the day, I didn't want to get anywhere near it. I mean, there was a horrible thing that happened.
You also mentioned that you drove with Chris Jericho from time to time. What was that like? And was it your idea to do the thing where he would beat you up on nitros occasionally?
I think that was Saturday night, actually. Saturday night. It was. I'd say it was 75% his idea and 25% my idea. I think he had the idea, and then we kind of talked through it to see what would be better. He's a really fun guy. You could tell from the very get-go that he had all the talent in the world. If anything was ever going to hold him back, it was going to be his size, and it didn't, because things changed, and the smaller guys were more accepted, because of their athleticism and their ability to cut a promo. We had fun doing that stuff. The only regret I have about anything ever had to do with Chris Jericho is, I don't know if you remember, or the fans remember, back in the day at one point, they were doing the action figures, and you would get something extra with the action figure. Like the Conan action figure, you got a little Rey Mysterio doll. And the Raven action figure, you got a breakable chair to hit over the head. They were going to do a Chris Jericho action figure with a David Penzer little figure with a removable tuxedo jacket. And he left and went to WWE before that happened. And that was my only chance to ever having an action figure. So it's the only negative thing I have to say about Chris. You could have hung around for 4 months and let me have my action figure. He's a super talented guy. He remains a friend. I'm proud to say that we were in Charleston, West Virginia, and he got up at a bar and did karaoke. And I said, Chris, you should sing. You should form a band. You could really sing. He goes, really? You think I could be a lead singer of a band? I said, yeah, you could sing. And I don't know if that's what gave him the inspiration to do Fozzy, but I'll take a little credit.
And were you there for his backstage altercation with Goldberg in WCW?
He wanted to set up this thing where Goldberg was going to spear him out of his wrestling boots. He wanted to get Goldberg over. And Goldberg at the time, and I'm glad for Bill that he's doing so well, and Bill's a super nice guy, but Bill had he was what they wanted Eric Watts to be, what Bill wanted Eric Watts to be, go to 0 and 100, from 0 to 100 in months, if not weeks. And he just caught fire, and he had so many voices in his ear. Do this, do this, do this. Don't do this, don't do this. You know, and here's a guy that really doesn't have a lot of experience, and all these veterans are telling him all these different things. So I think that he started getting very, he didn't like, I think he started trying to like just not listen to all these ideas because they were confusing with him. Well, Chris was trying to start like this little mini blow-off feud where eventually he would literally spear him out of his boots. Chris was going to kick off his boots. And Bill said something. I don't remember exactly what happened, but Bill didn't want to do it. Didn't think that Chris was at the level that deserved that kind of push to even go back and forth with him on a microphone. Or that's the story that was told. Chris got annoyed, and I think when Chris went to WWF and he finally gained the credibility that he gained. And if Goldberg came in back then with an attitude, I think Chris said, you know what, you might have been able to get away with it then, but, we aren't going to do this again. Chris is a tough guy.
Do you think that they ended Goldberg's streak too early in WCW?
It's a hard question to answer because you got to end it at some point. But I think the way they did it, and they did the Kevin Nash beating him, and then the push, the finger tap of death, whatever they call it, when Hulk went over, or that's why Hulk went over Kevin. It was all a scheme. I think they could have got
45,000 fans.
Yeah, I certainly will say this. I think they could have gotten much more out of Goldberg's first loss than they got. I think that they blew a fantastic opportunity. Whether it was too soon, I don't know. But I think that it was. I think all parties would admit in hindsight that there would have been a much better opportunity to draw money doing something different, doing it a different way.
As the ring announcer who was at most of those events when his streak was really taking off, what was the crowd like?
Oh, unbelievable. I mean, I wasn't a ring announcer, but I was a fan back when Hulkamania took off in '84, and it was crazy. I mean, you had sold out arenas chanting his name, and I mean, there used to be people would no show, people would get hurt, people would know. If Goldberg no showed to show that he was in the main event of, we once literally he couldn't get on an airplane. We had to rent a private jet and a private helicopter, and I think it was in Connecticut, and postpone the show from a 7:30 start to an 8:30 start just to be able to get Goldberg there because they were threatening to riot if Goldberg didn't show up. It was crazy. It was like the Beatles. That you see the stories about the Beatles. It was crazy, and I'll tell you what, I don't know what was in his head as far as all the different people telling him what to do. I will tell you, as far as having a big head, he always had time for his fans. He would literally stand there. I would see him sometimes standing in a garage in a hotel in freezing weather, signing autographs for fans for an hour after a Monday night show. I would go up, take a shower, go bar, have a drink, and get ready to go to another bar with some of the guys, and he's still standing out there in his sweatshirt signing autographs for people. So, I mean, he really appreciates his fans. He had all the time in the world for him. He never let that get to his head. But I do know that there was a lot of people pulling him in a lot of different directions. When somebody gets over so big, there's a lot of people that like to jump in on that popularity because there's money to be earned and there's power to be gotten.
And what was it like in WCW when DX did their invasion? What was it like on the inside of that arena that day?
We didn't know they were there.
Okay.
We didn't know they were there. It was like every other day. And then come to find out, I mean, I guess Doug Dillinger knew they were there, but it wasn't like it was a big deal. It wasn't like everybody was... I think at some point it got around that WWF cameras were there, but we were just playing in the Nitro. Or Thunder, whatever it was, at the Scope, and when you see what happened after the fact, and it was a turning point, obviously, in the war. I think Eric would have let him in.
Yeah. But
nobody really knew.
Because you guys had big barbarian guys that could easily.
I mean, I can't tell the story because I wasn't in that inner circle, but. As far as I was as the ring announcer, I didn't know, and my group of friends that I hung out with, we didn't know. The producers didn't know, and I know Eric Bischoff had at that time had of Steel. He would have let him in. There's not a doubt in my mind. So it was really a missed opportunity. It made us look pretty bad in hindsight, but we were oblivious to the whole thing. I wish I would have known. I'd have got out there and checked it out.
And what put an end to Eric Bischoff's first reign? Do you think there's anything in general?
He was just so burnt out, man.
Yeah.
He had so much, he had the weight of the world on his shoulders, all those egos getting involved. He had to produce, hours and hours of television. It's just pure burnout. I honestly think it was so bad that if he hadn't stepped away or been fired or whatever happened, he probably might have really lost it. Might have really cracked up a bit there. I'm not saying he'd be in an insane asylum or anything, but you can't have the power, the weight of the world on your shoulders like that, week after week after week after week after week, with so many people coming at you in so many different directions. Because then you had the young guys going, but it's my turn, and the Guerreros going, I want to be in the main event, and you promised me this and you promised me that, and then you got the Nash's going, but they're small cruiserweights, and the Mexicans are annoyed because it got out of control. Everybody admits that. I'm not telling you anything you haven't heard before. I'm not telling you anything that hasn't been written before. Egos got totally out of control. And I could tell you that, not to get ahead of myself again, but at the end, when he was trying to buy the company, those egos were reined back in. And if that company would have been sold to Eric, and we would have kept the time slot, I think he had learned his lesson from before. And I think that the company, if it had a time slot, had every chance to succeed. And that's getting ahead of the but he, at the time, he just had so much going on. I think it was just, he had to get out of there and go away and get some peace and quiet.
Do you think he made a mistake signing Bret Hart to so much money when WWE was basically getting rid of Bret Hart at that point anyways?
I will say I was shocked at how he was used. I thought if you're going to pay him that much money, I could have thought, and I'm not claiming to be some booker extraordinaire, but I, as a fan who was in the business, but I'm a fan watching. When I'm at ringside, I'm watching as a fan. I was shocked that they went the directions that they went with him, and there were some obvious things that they could have done that would have drawn money that never were done. Why that is, who knows? Again, there's a lot of creative control involved in those. A lot of decisions. We use that word a lot in this interview. But
what did you think of it when they brought Vince Russo in? I
like Vince Russo. He's a nice enough guy. I love Ed Ferrara. He's a good friend of mine. I just want to say this. I wasn't a fan of their booking. I wasn't a fan. I thought it was infantile. I thought it was silly. I thought it would insulted a lot of people's intelligence. People will put up with a lot of stuff if they're a wrestling fan. If they're a Nitro fan, they'll be willing to look over a lot of DQ main events that you roll your eyes at, and angles that change because of different things happening. This guy getting hurt, or Scott Hall needing to go take a couple weeks off. People will roll their eyes and they'll stick with the product. But when you insult their intelligence, when you put Prince Iakea out there as a guy who's supposed to be a prince, who's supposed to be Prince the singer. The things that they did, I'm not a big fan of. I've said it to their face. I don't think they're bad people. I think they were trying to do something that didn't work. Whether they'll admit now it didn't work or not, I don't know. But I'll tell you, as far as this fan goes, who was there for it all, what they were trying to do didn't work.
And the infamous Bash at the Beach situation with Hulk Hogan, you mentioned something about this off camera. What were you told about that whole thing?
All I was told, I was working in talent relations. So towards the end of WCW, I actually got a lot of opportunities. I got an opportunity with Larry to do the play-by-play. I got an opportunity to do the live event stuff that Gene wasn't doing anymore. Got an opportunity to sit as a junior member of the booking team, and I got an opportunity to work in talent relations under Terry Taylor. And if WCW was sold to Eric, John Laurinaitis was going to be Eric's right-hand man, and I was going to be John Laurinaitis' assistant. That was etched in stone. I'd already been told that. Talent relations. Only thing I could tell you for sure about that angle is the Thursday before Bash at the Beach, I was told to call Booker T and tell him to bring a suit for the next Nitro because he was going to be world champion that Monday. Now, how it was supposed to go down to how it really went down, did Hulk change plans? Did Vince go into business with himself? I don't know, and I don't think anybody, only the parties will ever know. Vince Russo and Eric and Hulk, and to a lesser extent Jeff Jarrett, will ever really know what happened. But what I will tell you was the plan was all along for Booker T to walk out of that pay-per-view as WCW World Heavyweight Champion. That's my little 2 cents on the deal.
And you mentioned that you were part of talent relations. When did that actually start happening? When did you get that job?
I never got like a raise for it. My thing is I always wanted to do as many things as I could. A ring announcer could be easily replaced. A guy could get hired as an executive producer, and he could have a nephew who wants to be the ring announcer. You never know. So that's why I never missed a Nitro, never missed a Thunder, only didn't do Saturday night when I was booking Saturday night with Jimmy and Arn and Tony, and I was at the gorilla position back then, and we hired a backup because at that point we were running like the wind, and I needed a little bit of time off because I was getting physically exhausted. But one weekend a month, so we hired a guy. But even when I first started, before I was in talent relations, I was in production. I was a producer for the live specific market interviews like we talked about. I was the producer for some of the B shows. So I always wanted to do as many things as I could do, and I didn't ask for extra money for them. It was job security. The more things that you do in a company like that, the more value you have. The more they're not going to get rid of you if somebody else comes along and says, hey, I know this guy who wants to be a ring announcer, or let's try Pamela Paulshock as the ring announcer, and because she's prettier than Penzer, which she was, and see if she'll do a good job. So look how it is now with almost all women. So they were actually onto something with the Pamela Paulshock.
So your dealings in talent relations at that time were basically just small jobs, like calling someone to tell them what to wear at the next show, or
helping to write the house shows with Terry. I didn't get involved in contract negotiations or anything like that. That was Terry, and JJ worked a little bit with that. He wasn't totally talent relations, but he was sort of a little bit of everything. Again, my habit of what I did was a lot of things that people, going back to when I used to run talent for the market specs for Jim Ross, going back to when I used to get the sign-in sheet done or run off copies of the script for the agents and stuff. Just a lot of busy work. But busy work means something, and the more you do busy work, the better you have a shot at. If there's somebody on the chopping block, I'll keep the guy who does the busy work.
And the Ultimate Warrior was in WCW for a while. What was he like backstage?
He was a little bit of a strange guy. I don't think anybody would dispute that. Again, he kept to himself. He kept to himself even more so than Hulk and like Randy back in the day. He really kept to himself. But it was cool to see the first Piper and then Ultimate Warrior feud get concluded, in a different promotion. I'm not going to sit here and swear that it was all the best that they could do, that some things weren't silly or some things you had to stretch your reality. But it was cool to see those feuds blown off.
Is it true that he actually went overtime during his first speech?
Oh yeah, like 15 minutes. They kept trying to cut him.
What was the reaction? What were you hearing like on the head?
Get him the hell off! Somebody make him stop talking. Yeah, he went way over.
And you've mentioned the headsets a few times. Just for someone that doesn't know, what type of things would you hear in the headsets?
I had an IFB in my ear.
Yeah.
The IFB was for the producer of the show. For Nitro was Keith Mitchell, who still works to this day for TNA. Great guy. He lived in Peachtree City too. He didn't hang out with us degenerate stuff. And he would tell me when to go. He would, on those Nitros where they were writing the show literally during the show, he would tell me what match was next because I didn't have a script. So he would talk in my ear. As far as the other, the headset that I would wear, that was so that I could speak to anybody in the truck if they needed me to give a signal to somebody, if they needed me to find somebody for them that they were trying to find that might be out at ringside, Doug Dillinger. So I was sort of the conduit because they couldn't really talk to Tony or Larry or whoever because they were live on the air during the matches. So I was sort of the conduit to a lot of that stuff.
And did you have much dealings with Vampiro in WCW?
Not in WCW. We worked a lot together in the XWF, not in WCW.
I'll wait till that then. What do you think ultimately led to the end of WCW?
Well, I mean, in simple terms, they cut the time slot. I mean, that, we've already described a lot of the dysfunction that went on, and because of that dysfunction, there was money being lost, and Time Warner, Ted Turner lost almost all his power because of the AOL and Time Warner mergers. It was almost like the perfect storm. The Time Warner and AOL didn't want wrestling. They could care less if it was the #1 show on cable television or if it was still in the top 10. They didn't want it. They didn't want it. They didn't want to be a part of it. Ted Turner would fight for us, but Turner was losing power. At the same time, Eric's trying to buy the company because they've already determined they don't want the company anymore, but we'll let you keep the time slot. Well, then when they took away the time slot, then it was over. It was over. Eric, I remember Eric saying, if I had 6 months to find another network, I probably could have found a time slot, but you gave me a week and a half. I can't find a time slot in a week and a half on a major network for a wrestling show. So, I always look back at what could have been, and I don't say this to sound cocky, but I truly believe that if WCW was still alive today, that I would be like some kind of vice president or something. I really was working hard to sort of fast track my way into all aspects of the business. And but it's not, and I'm not, and I sell real estate. So there you go.
Because Bischoff was actually going to buy it for considerably more than what WWE paid for it, correct?
Well, yeah, because Bischoff was buying a time slot.
Right.
He was buying television time. And WWF, whatever you want to call them, they were buying rings, and they weren't even buying the contracts of the guys,
And I've heard you tell a Ric Flair story on a podcast from a while ago that I'm sure our fans haven't heard, so I was just wondering if you could tell the story of your first meeting with Ric Flair.
The one when I had first started in the business?
Yeah.
This was when I was working with Bob Roop, doing indie shows. Let's go back before I started driving guys up and all that stuff. And so I met with so Bob Roop, NWA had a TV taping at the Knight Center, James L. Knight Center building in Miami. So Bob calls Danny Miller, who's the local promoter, and says, hey, I got this guy, I run shows with him. Is there anything, you need him to do? He'd like to get his foot in the business. He ring announces, blah, blah, blah. He says, yeah, send him down. So I met Danny Miller, go in there. Danny goes, I'm sure there's a lot of local guys in the dressing room. I'm sure you know them. You could go wait there, and if there's anything you could do to help, I'll let you know. I go in there, and I'm sitting in one of the dressing rooms with a lot of the local guys because it was a TV taping, so they were doing jobs, putting guys over. Ric Flair came up to me and lost it. Who are you? What are you doing here? And I'm trying to explain, I'm in the business and cut me a new one and threw me out of the building. And, I was like, that couldn't have gone any worse. I'm here to try to catch a break. And the guy who's the world champion at the time, one of the top wrestlers, the top wrestler other than Dusty in the company, basically just threw me out of the building. Funny follow-up to that story is the first time I went up and drove those guys to WCW, to Marietta, to the TV taping, Bob Roop was still an agent. And I told Bob Roop, Bob, I need to make sure that you're going to be there when I get there, so that you could go you could vouch for me if Ric Flair tries to throw me out again. Well, Bob had gotten into a minor car accident, and he was like really late. So I spent the entire afternoon hiding from Ric Flair because I was sure that Ric Flair was going to Now think about that. That was 6 months, 8 months earlier. He's traveling from town to town doing what Ric Flair does. He would have never remembered me. And but I'm in my mind, because I don't know all these things and I'm green as grass, I'm petrified that I'm going to get thrown out of the building again. But I once told Rick the story and he didn't remember any of it, and he apologized, and we're good friends, and I just recently saw Rick, and Rick's doing really well.
Did you ever get the chance to go out with him?
Oh, I drove for 2.5 years. I drove with him in Narn.
And you survived?
I survived. I rode with him in Narn.
What's it like being with him at a bar during those years?
It's like what he says it's like. It's like what you think it's like. I was just at a bar with him in Jacksonville at a Legends of Wrestling event, and he paid the whole tab. And he's learned it's time to go sooner. He's learned you stay an hour, and and he still pays the tab, but then it's time to go. Let's go. I think his wife helps him with that. His wife helps keep him, because he doesn't want to get out of control anymore. But there are times he did. But no, I mean, look,
Do you have
every Ric Flair story you've ever heard, I've seen it, or I've seen something like it, and he's what you see is what you get. He's 24/7 Ric Flair.
Do you have any in particular story of him at a bar that really stands out?
Well, there was one time in London where Rick is known for having a few drinks and pulling the pants down thing. And there was one time in London where I was with my wife. I had taken her to the trip, and so my wife could honestly say she's seen Ric Flair's package. Look, every night's an adventure. Was an adventure with Rick. I had the honor of traveling with Rick and Arn. I traveled with Arn a lot, actually, towards the end, last 4 or 5 years. Had the honor of traveling with Rick and Arn for about 2 years on and off. It was a blast. It was a ton of fun. It was a dream come true. And I can't even think of one particular story because every night was a story.
Were you in WCW when Arn and Sid had their stabbing?
I was there. I wasn't overseas. Gary was on that tour. Gary Capetta.
Oh, okay. But basically there was an argument on the bus and it led to...
As best as I remember, Sid lost his mind, either knocked on or kicked in Arn's door at the hotel. They were fighting. Arn grabbed a pair of scissors to try to save his life. Sid got stabbed a bunch of times by Arn. Both went to the hospital. I think Sid got the worst of it because scissors is worse than your fists. Wasn't really friendly with Arn at the time, a little bit. I was just getting to know him. He was worried that he was going to lose his job, obviously. But he said I had to defend myself.
So to finish up with WCW, you were, of course, the ring announcer for the last Nitro. Do you want to just go over what it was like that night?
Well, we had heard all kinds of rumors about, what was happening with Eric buying the company, and never heard anything about WWE buying the company until a couple weeks before the last Nitro, really like a week. And I remember waking up one day and I turned on the internet and there was a splash page and it was on WWE.com, WWF.com, whatever it was called at the time. And it had the WWF logo in the upper left corner and then buys in the middle, the word buys, and then the WCW logo. And I looked at my wife, she was there in the kitchen, and I said, I guess it's over. And so I went into the last Nitro. I said to myself, no matter what happens, if this is my last ever wrestling show, I'm going to go out, I'm going to work my you-know-what off, I'm going to entertain these fans, I'm going to make sure the show has a good crowd and everybody's going nuts. And I will say that when the show was over and I walked to the back, Shane McMahon stopped me and told me I did a really good job and he was really impressed. So that and a dime got me a dime, but I was supposed to work for the WCW promotion that WWF was going to make separately, but that never happened, as we know, so there was no job.
And there's just a few other things from WCW I forgot about that I'll just go through quickly. Is it true that Sid had a pet squirrel?
Sid had a pet squirrel
that he would carry around?
I don't recall that.
Okay.
Now, I know he had a squeegee that he carried around one time. Have you heard the squeegee story?
With Brian Pillman?
Yeah, I was there.
Oh, you were there for that? Yeah. No, I've actually asked a few people about that, but they've only heard it. So yeah, that would be a great one.
Yeah. We were at the place called The Dungeon. It was the bar in the hotel in Atlanta where everybody stayed. Used to be Ramada. I don't know what it is now. And they gave us a good price, and they had a bar down there, and they called it The Dungeon, and it was just... so many crazy stories have happened down there, after TV, all the main guys would show up there. But so Sid worked for WWF at the time. He don't even know why he was in Atlanta, but he happened to come in the bar and he got in Pillman and Mike Graham's face. Now Pillman and Mike, especially Mike Graham, Pillman and Mike Graham were both small. But Mike Graham especially was a tough guy. He was an amateur wrestler, and he didn't care if you were 5'6" or 6'5" or whatever. He wasn't going to back down. He was a tough guy. And they started talking, and he was talking about how, WWF is so much better and WCW sucks. And, Mike said, why the hell are you here in this bar? And it got heated, and it got heated, it got heated. And Sid goes, I'm not going to let you talk to me like that. You'll see. And he went out to his car. He goes, I'm going out to my car. Well, we're all thinking he's getting like a gun or a knife. You know, it gotten really heated. And, you know, there was a little bit of worry in the room. The guy's going to come, you know, start shooting. I'll never forget. He walks in with a squeegee, you know, where you wipe the tire, you know, the ice from your car or the windshield wiper. And goes, "Come on, man." And instead of a fight breaking out, everybody in the entire hotel bar started laughing. And Sid was so humiliated by that, he probably to this day still wishes it never happened. But, I mean, it was just that we thought he was going to get like a weapon. And the guy brought a squeegee into the bar, and everybody just started laughing, and Sid stormed out. And that story will live on in infamy. But that place, the Dungeon, was a crazy place, man. I've seen the Nasty Boys and Kevin. Ask Brian Knobs. I heard you talking to Brian Knobs soon. Ask Brian Knobs about this. Kevin Sullivan's daughter, when she was 18, brought a boyfriend to wrestling. And after the matches down at the Dungeon, the Nasty Boys, along with Kevin, gimmicked the drink of the boyfriend, shaved his eyebrow, and put him on when he was passed out, put him on a luggage cart and left him up in the room, passed out on the luggage cart. Now, this is Kevin's daughter's boyfriend. And not only is Kevin laughing at this, but the daughter's laughing as well, that her boyfriend had just got knocked out and his eyebrow got shaved off. So you might want to ask Knobs about that. But, I mean, Harley Race loved his taser, and he would go around there tasing people in the behind, and people would jump up. I remember one time he tased me, and I, fell over 3 tables. And it was just, you know, if you think of a wrestler's circus with alcohol and anything goes, that's pretty much what it was.
Yeah, because I think he tased Owen Hart once in WWE too.
Oh, he loved that taser, man. Harley was a tough guy, but he loved to. He could do enough damage with his hands in his, you know, in a fight. But he just loved that taser. He'd give you just enough, not enough to hurt you, but just enough to let you know that to make you jump a little bit. Apparently, he had some of the strongest hands in the history of the wrestling business. But apparently, there's things he could do with his hands, breaking, you know, smashing apples, smashing things that normal people can't. Even people that are in good shape and strong can't squeeze. So apparently, his hand his hand strength was so much that people actually worried that if you're in a legit fight with him, he could squeeze your head or, you know, squeeze something, you know, do some damage.
And I don't know if you could answer this or not, but there's been rumors lately that Van Hammer's been saying that when the flock would sit in the crowd at WCW shows, they would actually smoke cigarettes, drink beer, and take pills, and they would actually have parties when they were in the front row there. They
live their character. Again with Scott Hall, whether how much you're living it, there was probably, they were drinking beer, they were smoking cigarettes. That was their characters. Their characters were a wacky group of misfits that, you know, so they were doing they weren't getting away with anything. Trust me, if management didn't want it to happen, it wouldn't have happened anymore. But I didn't even know Van Hammer was still around.
How did he last at WCW for so many years?
Good-looking guy with a bit muscular body in this business trumps a lot of different things, my friend. He just didn't have the coordination. He was a great athlete, good-looking guy, and he just could never get the coordination to be able to put it all together.
And is it true, I don't know if Benoit ever told you this, but there was a thing where he was supposed to wrestle DDP once, and DDP brought him a script.
Well, DDP would do that a lot. He would type out scripts to a lot of people. He got ribbed in the back about it, you know. People would rib him about it, but look, what could you say? At the time, it was people thought he was kind of wacky for writing scripts for a match, but you see now that WWE writes scripts for a lot of their matches, so maybe he was onto something, maybe he wasn't. At the time, you know, he got a lot of snickers behind his back probably. What did he care? Here's a 40-year-old guy, I don't remember how old he was, who literally got himself over on his own with one hold and different ways to get into it, and a lot of charisma and a lot of hard work. And look, even now, the DDP yoga's all over the place. So say what you want about Dallas Page. A lot of people like to snicker and joke about things that he did or you know, back then, like writing scripts. But, you know, it worked for him.
And were you around backstage for the Buff Bagwell-Ernest Miller confrontation?
No, I'm always in the ring. I always miss all the fun stuff. No, but I remember. Actually, I might have been. Because I got interviewed by security about it. I think it was after the matches. So I actually think I might have been. I think it got pulled off as a racial thing, where I think it was just two guys with strong egos that had a disagreement and it got to fisticuffs. Look, most of those fights, you could dream about knockdown, drag-out brawls like you see in the ring. Most of those fights are broken up within 30 seconds of the fights happening, and people coming together. So the backstage real fights always sound exciting. If you saw them on tape, they're not normally as exciting as they sound.
What do you think?
You know that.
Well, yeah. What do you think about Bagwell becoming a gigolo in recent years?
I don't know if that's a work or if that's a shoot. Buff has been through a lot. Mark has been through a lot. I'm glad to see he's come out the other side, because he was in another one who was in a dark place for a real long time. Had a real hard time getting out of that place. So I'm glad he seems to have come out of it. And, he was one, if you'd have asked me if I'd expected him to be alive right now 10 years ago, I'd say no. So I'm glad he was able to come out of the darkness but as far as the gigolo thing, I don't know. Is that real? Do you know for a fact that's real?
He claims it's real. You'll know more about his credibility than me.
I just assumed it was a gimmick to get a little bit of publicity and get him on that show. I didn't know that, and I know his wife pretty well. I don't think his wife would be letting him sleep with other ladies, but who knows? People are strange.
According to the waiter I had the other night at a restaurant in Orlando, he used to work at a restaurant in Atlanta. And Bagwell would frequent there with different ladies, and he would be bragging that...
like recently? Like as part of the gigolo gimmick?
Yeah.
Maybe it's true. If Buff Bagwell could get $10,000 to do all that, God bless him. That's the beauty that's the American dream.
And I forgot to ask you about this when we were talking about the Warrior, but... Apparently there was an incident where Curt Hennig took a crap under the ring before the Warrior had to come out.
Curt Hennig ate as much as he could that day in catering and ate as much stuff that would get you gassy and, to give you diarrhea as you can. You could think of things that might give you diarrhea. I know this is a family show, so I don't know how far you want me to go. And he actually went so far as to take, and you can edit this out if this is too bad, toilet paper and plug up so that it wouldn't come out until the right time. Curt Hennig's one of the funniest guys I ever met. God bless him. They talk about the guys you miss the most. I think that the guys I miss the most, Curt Hennig is way up there, if not the guy. And I miss so many guys. But yeah, and as soon as they go 3, 2, 1, and that segment was about to begin, it all came out right in in one of those like paint cans that where you put paint in and you carry. And
he was under the ring.
They were all under the ring.
Who were the others? There was Warrior.
It was all of the NWO was under the ring. So I mean, not Hogan or any of the big names.
Norton.
So I think Scott Norton puked, or the Giant puked. I mean, it was, and he was bragging about it, meticulously planning it all day. I mean, it wasn't just like last minute thing. From the moment he heard he was going to be hiding under the ring, he formulated in his mind every step of that plan he was going to do, and he executed. I can tell you that.
Could you smell it from ringside?
Yes.
That's hilarious.
And he would laugh. If he was here right now, he would laugh as hard as he could about it. He was proud of it.
And I got to ask you, since we're interviewing the Nasty Boys, what was that whole thing with the Nasty Boys and Kevin Nash?
We actually just talked about that at that Legends of Wrestling event. Sags had a bad neck, and they'll be able to tell you much more than me. But the thing is, Sags had a bad neck, and he didn't want to go on the road. And Kevin said, "Please, we need you to do these dates." And
Kevin Sullivan
was the booker. Said, "Please, go on the road. We need you to do these dates." And Sags said, "You need to tell these guys to lay it off on the neck." So apparently they were told to lay it off the neck. It was somewhere in Louisiana. Don't remember Lafayette, one of those places. And the sequence of events they could tell you better than I. But at one point, Hall nailed him right on the part of his neck that was bad. And he freaked out and went to town on him and bloodied him up a little bit, and that got ugly in the back. There was baseball bats being taken out, and it was an ugly scene. I'm sure Scott Hall would have his side of the story, and Kevin Nash would have his side of the story. I think X-Pac was supposed to get involved in a run-in and missed it for some reason, and so it was a triple threat between Nasty Boys, Kevin and Scott, and Ming and Barbarian.
And the last backstage fight, backstage altercation I'll ask you about, because you're probably very familiar with Piper, is the one that happened between Kevin Nash and Roddy Piper backstage. They both told very different versions of the altercation, but I'm wondering if you have the more neutral.
I don't. I wasn't there. I will tell you that I spent 6 weeks in a tour bus with Roddy Piper. I was the manager of his book tour in 2003, so I got to know Roddy real well. I heard his side of the story real well, and I got to hang out a lot and get really friendly with Kevin Nash in TNA, and I heard his side of the story. And unfortunately, unlike the Vader story, I wasn't in there, so I don't know. They certainly have two different stories. I usually say when there's two different stories, usually the truth meets somewhere in the middle. Yeah, I got the honor of being Roddy Piper's tour manager. We went all around the country in Billy Ray Cyrus's tour bus, so that was interesting.
What's your favorite story about Roddy Piper from that 6 weeks you spent with him, which must have been quite something?
Yeah, it was quite something. We were coming into Ohio, Columbus, Ohio, before it was the morning of we're getting in the morning of the Ohio State Michigan game. I don't know if you're from Canada, but Ohio State Michigan is a huge rivalry. So they had so I got a call from somebody and said, we're having a tailgate party at 8 in the morning at a bar. Could Roddy stop by and say some words to psych up the Ohio fans? So I'm thinking, a tailgate party at 8 in the morning, maybe there'll be 100, 200 people there, maybe eating breakfast. I couldn't understand, but I said, Roddy, you want to do it? He goes, sure, because there were going to be television cameras there. That was the key. So we get to this bar, and literally at 7 in the morning, there was 6,000 drunk fans at 7 in the morning packing this bar the day of that game. I've never seen so many drunk people at 6 in the morning in my life. And Roddy got out and gave this, the chew bubble gum thing, and gave this awesome speech, and the crowd went crazy, and we had a blast doing that. But that was a memory, because you never think you're going to pull up to a bar at 7 in the morning and there's going to be thousands and thousands of trash people that are there. But I guess that now my son went to college in not Ohio State, but a small D3 school right down the road, and I guess that's their thing they do.
And what's he like off camera as a real person?
Roddy, when he pays you, when you're working for Roddy wants you to do your job. But Roddy was one of the kindest people that you'd ever meet. He's always, hey, how you doing? Give you a hug, put his arm around you. How's the family? Very sweet personality. But when it comes to business, he doesn't mess around. If he didn't like something I was doing, he didn't hesitate to let me know he wasn't happy. So, as a businessman, he made you work hard. As a human being, he was a terrific guy.
I understand you were part of this XWF promotion.
The mystery promotion. If a promotion takes 5 really good episodic hours of TV with really great talent, and it never airs, does it really exist? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question. I just posed that to Sonny Ono on social media. But XWF was a company that Greg Valentine, Brian Knobs, and Jimmy Hart found some investors. One of the investors was a guy named Kevin Harrington, who was one of the original judges on Shark Tank. And he was an infomercial guy, big, very successful infomercial guy. They were all involved in infomercials in one way or another, all the people that got involved. And they decided to start a wrestling company. So my bosses were Jimmy and Greg and Knobs. And it's kind of an eclectic group of people you work for, especially when you've been working for Tony Schiavone and Eric Bischoff. But I needed a job. My severance was up. Literally, my severance ended the week I got paid first from the XWF, so that was a great opportunity. They would fly me down here from Atlanta. I'd stay during the week. They'd fly me back up. My job was talent relations. I was in charge of talent relations. I sat on the booking team, and when they needed a ring announcer, when they were doing the taping, I was the ring announcer. It really became a huge project of love for me because I had a piece of it. I had a piece of the planning. I helped edit it, the hours of television. I was involved in all facets of it. It was one of those situations, wrong place, wrong time. We taped, like I said, 5 really good 1-hour episodes of television. We had Roddy Piper, we had Jimmy Snuka, rest in peace. We had Sable in a role as the CEO. We were given a big push to Vampiro as a top baby face. We had the Road Warriors, the Nasty Boy. I mean, the list goes on and on. We had great talent. We had the young and up and coming AJ Styles, who we were going to give a massive push to. And so we did these great tapings. We edited them. The problem was, by the time we did them, well, first of all, you knew that there was going to be something wrong. Jerry Lawler had lost his job at WWE. He walked out when his girlfriend got fired. So we had him and Tony Schiavone doing the tapings. Well, Jerry came the day of the show and said, I can't do the tapings. I just got a job offer with WWF again. This promotion, by the way, got more people jobs with WWF than anything else that's probably ever happened. Because half the guys, the moral of the story is, half the guys on the taping ended up back at WWF by the time we had time to go promote the TV, the 5 episodics. Me and Gene got hired back. He was our guy. Lawler got hired back. He was our guy. Hulk got hired back. He was part of the deal. Piper got hired back. Kurt Hennig got hired back. Bobby Heenan got hired back. The list goes on and on. So we're basically taking a tape to a bunch of television executives, and we're saying, here's what we got. We want you to air this, and then we'll tape more. And they say, oh, great. You got Hulk Hogan. He's a huge name. Well, actually, I hate to say this, but he's back in WWE now. All right, well, cool. But you got Jerry Lawler. He's kind of back in the. You got Kurt. After a while, the executives were like, "What are you showing me? You got great tape, but you got nobody under contract anymore." So it is what it is. It was a great opportunity. I think we really could have done something, but it just was the wrong place and the wrong time, quite frankly.
Wasn't one of Kurt Hennig's last matches for that?
Yeah, he wrestled Hulk in a dark match, and then he was one of the top guys. We promoted the main feud was going to be Road Warriors and Nasty Boys, and Kurt Hennig managed by Bobby Heenan against Vampiro. We were really giving Vampiro a push. I don't know whether it would have worked or not, quite frankly, but we thought he had, for the time, and we thought he had a unique gimmick, sort of almost like a modern version of Sting, but we never got the chance to find out.
Is it true that Vampiro had some heat with Macho Man in WCW because he was friends with this band, the Misfits, that he brought to a taping, and one of them ended up stealing Macho Man's girlfriend, Gorgeous George, at the time?
I know the story, but I don't know if there's any heat with Vampiro about it. I know that she did ended up hooking up with one of the guys from the Misfits, but I don't know if there's any truth that a lot of these stories take on lives of their own. He might have been annoyed, and it might have grown over the years that he had heat, or there was an exchange. I don't know, but yeah, she was definitely Jerry Only, I think his name was, from the Misfits.
Yeah, that was the end of Macho Man and her then, right?
Yeah, she's no longer married to Jerry Only. I recently saw her at WrestleCon last year at WrestleMania.
One other thing I have to ask you about XWF is when I wrestled in Puerto Rico, there was always boxes of XWF shirts that I don't know if they were still trying to sell them or what, but they were sitting at a storage room in the WWC office, so maybe you could explain.
We did an invasion angle.
Okay. Where
XWF was going to come. We showed our tapes on their show. They had 2-hour block. We'd show 1 hour of XWF for 5 weeks. And then some of the guys flew there to do angles. The Nasty Boys did an angle with Thunder and Lightning, and I forget who did an angle with Carlos, or I forget exactly the matchups, but we did an angle for an anniversary show where it was XWF versus WWC. I actually got to wrestle, quote unquote, one of the referees. I'd remember his name if you told me. We just kind of rolled around, and I was so blown up after 30 seconds, I let him pin me. Well, he was going to pin me anyway, but I let him pin me like 2 minutes before it was supposed to. Yeah, that was an interesting trip because I got written a check, and I took it to a check cashing place because I had heard horror stories, and I got my cash, and then a week later I found out the check bounced. So thank you, Victor Jovica. I appreciate it.
Yeah, you're definitely not the first. That's happened to me a lot with them, which is why I've left the company too. But did that happen with any of the bigger stars?
They all got paid in cash, I think.
Okay.
Not that I know of, but if it did, they probably wouldn't want to admit it, you know?
I know they did that. It happened to Heidenreich when I was there. And
Well, I had heard the story, so as soon as I landed, boom, right from the airport, I went to a check cashing store.
yeah.
You know?
You should have tried to cash it while you were in Puerto Rico. But I guess that's why the whole XWF thing didn't pan out with that.
It just didn't draw.
Yeah.
It just we didn't have enough of the stars there. We were putting guys like Ricky Santana and Fidel Sierra, who are two great talents, by the way. Don't get me wrong, and they're great friends of mine. But we're putting them in spots that on TV were Kurt Hennig and
And they were already in WWC, so it wasn't.
Yeah, exactly. So it was a very watered down invasion. Still don't even know how they're still in business. I mean, Carlos was a nice enough guy. I've met him, seen him a couple times. I don't know if he was just as much at fault and Jovica just took the heat, or if it was a good cop, bad cop thing. Or
I think it's a good cop, bad cop, because Carlos has a nice smile.
Yeah.
But I think basically how they say, like they only really do TV tapings now and they get money for the TV. But,
that's one way to do
they
it.
don't pay a lot of people. I don't think the locals are making money. So how did you go from the XWF to TNA?
Well, there was a big lull, actually. It wasn't like a jump from one to the other. I was out of the business for a while. I had started a company with some partners doing airbrush tattoos I still have it, but it's only seasonal. And theme parks, we got on cruise ships, zoos, aquariums. So that was my main business. It's called Australian Airbrush Tattoos.
And so after your time in XWF, I guess you had a break from wrestling, and then you went on to TNA. How did you become involved with TNA?
I started a business. I figured I was done with wrestling. There's been many times I figured I'm done, and then it's funny, they always tend to pull you back for something or other. But figured I was done. I had to live my life, so I started a business. Actually became somewhat successful, and still is a seasonal business. And Jeff had brought me in, after XWF ended, I started a company called In Your Face Bookings, where we did outside third-party bookings, and I was doing that to make extra money while I was starting up my other business. And, so like, you know what I'm talking about, right? Where people would call me and say, I want to book Jimmy Snuka, and I'd get it, $50 and handle all the issues. So, Jeff had brought me over at one point because they were booking the TNA talent, out as third-party contractors and paying them a guarantee, and he wanted me to handle that for him. And so I went to Nashville. This is before they were in Orlando.
Right.
They flew me to Nashville. I met with him and Dixie and Bob Ryder, and they tried to set up an online website. I was too busy. My company started growing really quick, and I had to pull out. But me and Jeff had always been friends. So I had figured I'm done in wrestling. I got this company doing well, knock on wood. That's behind me. Jeff called me and said, we have a spot for a ring announcer. It may just be one show because Shane Douglas has been doing the backstage interview guy, and Shane is going to miss a couple of shows. Borash has been the ring announcer, but we're going to make Jeremy Borash into the backstage announcer, which he was much better at, by the way. Jeremy always has done a great job doing that. And so we need you to ring announce. You're close. It was an hour and a half away. You know what you're doing. We don't have to train anybody. They offered me really nice money on a per deal basis. He said it could last, I'm not promising anything more than one show. It lasted 5 years. I I had the best time I ever had in the professional wrestling business in TNA. I had no personal investment. In WCW, I had a personal investment because I felt like I was growing with the company and I had a future there. In XWF, I had a personal investment because I was involved in every facet of the process, from writing to booking to editing to everything. So there was always that pressure of having a personal, if things don't go well, not that I didn't care if TNA didn't go well. I was hired to work there. I got there. I went to the production meeting. Me and Mike Tenay and Don West would sit around the table in the production meeting room. Kevin Nash would come in and talk to us for a while. Jim Cornette would come in and talk for us for a while. Bubba Ray would come in and talk for us for a while. It would just be like, 4 or 5 hours of telling stories, just laughing for like 5 hours. Then I put on my tux, I went out and I did my stuff. I got paid well, went back to the hotel, had a few drinks with the guys, do it again. It was a great opportunity without the pressure of having a personal investment of, I didn't need the job. You know what I mean? If it only lasted 1 week, then that would have been great. And there's a difference of when you need something or when you're offered something as a side, something extra. And this was something extra. And it lasted 5 years, and I had a blast doing it. And, they certainly have had their ups and downs. I was there when Hulk came in and Eric came in, and they tried to go head-to-head, and lightning doesn't strike twice. But
do you think that was their biggest mistake?
They had to try it. It worked once, and they had to try it. In hindsight, it didn't have a shot, but you got it, because you keep saying, okay, if I only had Kurt Angle, we might be able to make something out of this. Then you get Kurt Angle. Well, if I only had Hulk Hogan, then we can make something out of this. Well, then Hulk Hogan comes and gets a little bit. Well, if I only had Hulk Hogan and Ric Flair, and then if I only have Hulk Hogan, Ric Flair, RVD, Mr. Anderson would do. And it's working a little bit, but it's not all coming together like you planned. The ultimate is if we could only go live head to head. That was sort of like the last chance of trying to really compete. I think they realized after that they were a secondary product. They were trying to become true competition. And I think after they went head to head and it didn't work out, I think that's when they realized, it's okay if you're profitable being a secondary product. WWE has grown so big now that nobody's going to be able to tackle them like WCW did for a while. But you run out of if we only had fill in the blank, and they had to try it, and it didn't work. I still think if they were still on Spike TV and they didn't blow that deal, things would have been better. I don't know the ins and outs. I do know that they found out Vince Russo was secretly involved somehow, and it upset some of the people at Spike, and I think that's where it really kind of fell off. And I wish the new management the best. I know how it feels like to lose a job that pays for your family to pay their bills, but also that you love doing. So I never would wish anything bad on TNA or any other promotion other than Victor Jovica.
Was that legitimate when Kurt Angle supposedly hurt you?
I'll tell you what was legitimate. The elbow was legitimate. The clothesline I didn't feel. The hitting with the shoes was legitimate, and the ankle lock I didn't feel. You could find pictures of me on the internet I look like the Elephant Man. What happened was I actually that day was at a trade show for my other company in Orlando, and I only got to TV instead of getting there for the production meeting. I had permission from Jeff just to get there like an hour before, and so we didn't really have a lot of time to go over what we were going to do. I didn't know until I got there that it was going to be physical, and we really didn't have a lot of time to go over it. And I think that Kurt, and he said all but so, was afraid that if he didn't lay the elbow in a little bit good, that I would, because I'm not a worker, that I wasn't going to sell it right. I don't think he intended to do what he did. The shoe thing, he was supposed to hit me over the head with the shoe, and I was supposed to go like that so he would only hit my arms. But he swung wildly and it went over and hit the other side. So I had huge bumps. You can look it up, you can Google it. Huge bumps on both sides. I did get a nice bonus that I wasn't expecting. So,
what are your thoughts on Kurt Angle going into the WWE Hall of Fame?
Kurt's a great wrestler. Kurt's a great guy. Kurt's beaten his demons. I saw him in TNA when he obviously he wasn't all He wasn't, he was definitely on some stuff. I don't know what it was. He'll admit to it. I know he had some DUIs. Kurt's a good guy. He turned his life around. He had a hard situation with what happened with Karen and that whole situation, and found another woman that he's now, I think, on their third child. I wish Kurt nothing but here's a guy who won an Olympic gold medal in Greco-Roman wrestling with a broken neck. One of the toughest guys in the world. Freestyle wrestling.
Yeah.
Sorry, with a broken neck. So, and everybody that's watching this knows that. So, I think he'd love to do one more match. My personal opinion is they're not going to let him do it. But we'll see.
And you don't have to answer this one if you don't want to, but I've never really heard the real story on this. What exactly happened with Jeff Jarrett taking Kurt Angle's wife?
It was a bad situation when it all came out in the open. I think Dixie overreacted to it by sending Jeff home and handling it the way she did. I mean, we're all adults. Yes, it was messy. But I think everybody could have probably figured out a way to deal with it. So... I didn't know until I knew. I showed up at TV one day and Jeff wasn't there, and there was no mention of Jeff. And Jeff used to run the production meetings, and I said to, such and such, "Where's Jeff? You don't want to talk about it." Somebody, "Where's Jeff? You don't want to talk about it." Finally, I heard somebody else talking about it, and I'm like, as is my history, I stayed as far away from that. That was at the time it was a pretty tense situation.
And Jeff's back involved with TNA.
Yeah. From what I hear as a consultant, good for him. I'm glad Dutch is back. Dutch is a smart guy, and I hope they can turn the place around. They got new management. I think if Dixie wasn't so obsessed with being a character, that they might have had something there. Sometimes you could get too, and it's happened to the best of them. It probably happened to Eric as a character when he made himself a character in WCW as the head of the NWO. He got a little bit, going out. Look, like I said earlier, it's a ton of adrenaline to go out in front of 20,000 people and make them cheer you, boo you, whatever, and that could take over. And I think if Dixie would have stuck to doing what she does best, which is PR, I think that it could have worked out better, but I wish him best of luck.
Did you have any direct dealings with Dixie?
Yeah, she never did me wrong, I could say this now because, I don't ever like to kill any potential opportunity I might have down the road, even though I'm 50 and nobody's looking to hire a 50-year-old ring announcer. But, she wasn't my favorite person I ever worked for. She wasn't my least favorite. I wish her well. Again, I think that a lot of times in this business, and it even happened to me a little bit in the height of WCW, ego has a way of getting in the way of real life. And, there were some decisions that I made with old friends of mine when my ego got a little big that I lost touch with a lot of people for a long time because, I was this big, this guy on TV in a tuxedo that a couple of people actually wanted an autograph if I walked out of a building. And I traveled with Arn Anderson, Ric Flair, and Chris Jericho. It gets to you. It gets to the best of you. And so I don't blame anybody for ever being in that position. And it's just, I know that you've been in the business a long time, and I'm sure you could probably say the same thing. It gets intoxicating sometimes.
And do you think another company is ever going to pop up? Like, I wish TNA the best too, but I don't feel that it's ever going to reach the level of WCW. Do you think there's a chance of anything popping up ever that's going to duplicate what WCW had as far as competition?
No, not what WCW had. No, it's WWE's game to lose. Their biggest competition is what they created, NXT. So when you had to create your biggest competition, it's going to be hard to get anybody to put any money into trying to beat that, because now you're beating two WWE. You're trying to beat two WWE promotions. What I think is happening right now is I think because of the WWE Network, and I think because of NXT and the different style of wrestling that Vince really likes, but Triple H has embraced, like with this UK thing they just did that I didn't see, but I heard it was pretty cool, and some of the other things that they've done working with Evolve, with Ring of Honor drawing decent houses, a lot of indie shows drawing better than houses than they have in years. I think what you're going to see is a lot of a lot of WWE supportive products are going to be, how do I say this right? If some of the guys that were on the WWE Cruiserweight tournament that aren't there now, they're going to be bigger names on the indie scene. And and then you got this other network that's putting indie shows. So I think what you're going to have is the big bad, not bad, the big WWE with their NXT, and I think a lot of promotions that could be profitable, where the guys can make a decent living, Ring of Honor, Lucha Underground, stuff like that. But I don't think anybody's ever going to challenge and rise to that competition of WWE.
Right.
And nobody's willing to pay anybody but the WWE that kind of money to put on a wrestling show. I mean, Ring of Honor basically exists because they're owned by a television network. Lucha Underground is paying a lot of money to and mostly their stuff is being streamed online. Most people don't see it. NXT even, you have to see their NXT on WWE Network. So, TNA has a deal, but other than a couple of foreign countries, to my understanding, they're just trying to sell advertising on Pop TV. So you can't build up a company unless you do it organically, like through the internet or through a network that just grows organically. That's where somebody's going to be willing to pay you millions and millions of dollars to have wrestling on their television network. It's just, those days have gone and passed, and it's just a totally different world we live in. Twitter, social media, all that kind of stuff. Most people, my kids don't even watch TV anymore. They watch everything on Hulu or online or whatever. So, I think I think the big thing is going to be how WWE is able to compete with the lack of people watching television versus other platforms such as online and stuff like that. So that's going to be the interesting part, to see if WWE could keep their status up there, if they could get other people, because as the younger kids grow up, they're not watching TV anymore. Like I said, I have 20 and 22-year-olds. They don't watch TV. They watch stuff on the internet. They watch shows, but they don't watch TV.
Howard Finkel's probably the greatest wrestling announcer.
No, not probably. He is.
What are your thoughts on him?
He's just the best. I remember when I used to watch the Madison Square Garden shows on USA, on the MSG network. And my favorite part, even before I was a ring announcer, my favorite part of the shows was right before the main event. Howard Finkel would run down the card for next month. And he could make Bob Backlund defending the WWF title against the Samoan number 2 as the main event sound like a must-see. I got to be there. He just had a way to build up the crowd, build up the momentum of what you're going to see next that I'd never seen anybody do. Michael Buffer has a great one line. Let's get ready to rumble. It's the American dream. I've always said, people say, are you jealous that Michael Buffer, made all this money and because he had a line? No, the American dream is you make up a line, you make it famous, you become a millionaire. But there was nobody better in building up the excitement of something that was either really exciting or really not exciting, but he made it seem exciting, than Howard Finkel. I've gotten to meet Howard a couple of times. Howard's a true gentleman, and there's no other ring announcer that I believe will be in the Hall of Fame, nor is there anybody else that deserves it as far as WWE goes.
Do you think there's a chance, because of how big of a part you were to WCW and now WWE owns all their footage, that you may eventually be put in the WWE Hall of Fame?
No. I'll tell you what. I'll tell you one better. Went to the Hall of Fame last year because Sting went in. And in the packages, Sting was the main guy. In the packages that they had, they used my introduction to Sting. So to me, that was my Hall of Fame. That was my chance of getting as close to that Hall of Fame as I'm ever going to get, to have my introduction of an iconic wrestler who was the headliner of the Hall of Fame. I went because I wanted to see Sting go in, but I went also because I felt like that was as close as I was ever going to get. And you know what? I'm absolutely fine with it. I don't think I deserve it. I would bet you every dime I've ever had and ever will that it's not going to happen. They might put Lillian Garcia in. They seem to like Lillian, and Lillian's a nice lady. I have my doubts, but they might. But I don't see them putting any other ring announcers in the Hall of Fame. I think Howard Finkel stands alone, and I think it's fitting that he stands alone, quite frankly.
What advice would you give to an up-and-coming ring announcer?
Just work hard. Try to do as many things as you can. It's a totally different business from when I started. And in some ways, it was almost harder from when I started to get your foot in the door. But once you got your foot in the door, it was kind of easier to get something going, if that makes any sense. And now, there's just everybody and their brother wants to be a ring announcer. One of the reasons I don't get a lot of indie dates is because why would you want to pay me even an airfare? Forget about what you're going to pay me to do it. I don't ask a ton. Why would you want to pay airfare when you got 40 guys at the local radio station that want to be the ring announcer? Now, is it important? I think it's a job that in certain situations is a lot more important than some people think it is. But on an average house show, you could get anybody in there. I meet people all the time that want to be ring announcers. It's really tough right now. WWE has now hired some guys again in like NXT roles, but they were hiring all women for a while. My advice is work hard and say a lot of prayers and have a backup plan, because it's not easy. It wasn't easy when I was able to be lucky enough to do it, and it's certainly not easy now.
And any tip on keeping like the crowd hot or getting them built up? Say you want to film something and have a big crowd reaction. What's one of the ways you would use to get the crowd extra excited prior to a match?
Well, people love to be important. People love to feel important. They like to be on television. If you're talking about a TV match, you build up the match as an important match. You build up the show as an important show. And by all means, exaggerate. If it's gonna, we had a joke at TNA where we would say, you're gonna be seen in front of millions on Spike TV and over 124 countries. I don't know that there's 124 countries that have television networks that would put wrestling on. It was just a joke. I think JB made up 124 and I stuck with it. One of the things that me and JB I'll give him most of the credit, was we would say that the craziest, the loudest wrestling fans at the end of the night would get to go backstage and meet the talent. Sometimes they did, and sometimes there was no talent left around, so we had to kind of pretend somebody went backstage. But look, it's a show, and sometimes you have to exaggerate to get the reaction you need. I would never lie to anybody, but I will say this: if you're a ring announcer and you need to get a reaction, it doesn't hurt to exaggerate. Don't lie, but exaggerate. This is the biggest show that you've ever been a part of. This is potentially going to be in millions of homes all around the world. Whatever you want to say. I stole Gary's thing about, we have an applause meter in the truck, and we're going to see if you could beat out the 5 greatest crowds of the year. Actually, I guess I was lying in that one. But it was Gary's applause meter, not me. But it's not hard. People that come to a wrestling show, they want to be involved, especially if it's being taped for television. They want to be seen. They want to be part, everybody wants their fleeting fame. And so you just have to have the energy. It's all about energy. It's all about being able to talk in front of a crowd, all about being able to feel comfortable and just being able to change directions on a dime.
And you've probably seen more matches than a lot of people in the wrestling business.
Probably.
Probably at least tens of thousands, if not more. And what advice would you give a professional wrestler that might be watching this?
As far as
how to become a better professional wrestler, like what are some of the most important things you've seen of some of the great pro wrestlers over the years that you think are good traits?
Well, it all starts with charisma. I mean, you could be the best athlete in the world. If you have no charisma, if you don't have the right look, you're really not going to probably get anywhere. So it all starts with charisma.
Unless you're Kevin Owens.
I don't really watch the product. It's hard for me as a non-athlete to tell a wrestler what they need to do. There's guys that get over like Braun Strowman based on size and the right circumstances. A year ago, people thought that Braun Strowman was going to wrestle The Undertaker or Brock Lesnar at WrestleMania, and they groaned. This year, he had, I didn't see it, but apparently he had a sort of a stare down with Brock Lesnar on Raw, and people were going nuts. So it's about timing, it's about the right time at the right place, about charisma, about what they're looking for. If you'd have told me AJ Styles was going to be the top champion in WWE, I would tell you, A, he has all the talent in the world to do it, B, he should, and C, there's not a chance, and you know what?
Back when you were in TNA with him, right?
If you'd have told me 2 years ago, even when he started, I figured he'd be a mid-level guy, Intercontinental champion. I don't think they planned on making him such a big deal. He has it all. He has charisma, unique ability, and he has amazing talent. And everywhere he's gone, people have laughed at him. Not laughed at him to his face, but said, "You're too small, you can't talk," which I don't know why people say that, because he does some great promos from what I've seen in WWE. He's not Dusty Rhodes, but he's doing a serviceable, certainly, job. And you don't have the right size, you're never going to be it. And every place he goes, he's it. Whether it's New Japan or WWE, TNA, we wanted to make him it at the XWF. It's really hard for me to be able to tell an up-and-coming wrestler who's doing the things that I couldn't do on my best day what to do. But it's just a lot of luck. It's really a lot of luck. I just work hard. I believe in hard work, and you don't give up, and always have a plan B. Because if it doesn't work out, you need a plan B.
And is there any message you want to tell I know you might not think that you have that many fans, but fans of the WCW era and the WCW product will all remember you. So is there any message you want to tell your fans in closing here?
Yeah, well, first of all, I had an awesome time talking with you. I hope your fans and people will enjoy it. As far as people that might recognize me or remember me, I'm humbled. I got to live my dream. I got to honestly live my dream. I tell people I got to live my dream when I was young. The rest is gravy. What I'm doing now as a realtor, that's gravy. So anybody that ever supported me, anybody that ever remembers me, thank you. It was an honor to be a small part of history, and